I had originally planned to do this. Right, get away, fly! Ugh. I had originally planned to do that. Look what I have to put up with. Look, would you look at that? 31 degrees. Oh yes, it's very dry and not very humid and all that, but 31 degrees. I'll tell you right now, I don't know if you can see, but I am a wet rag, and the reason I'm a wet rag is I've just spent a few hours fighting with this monstrosity, this horrible old, oh Jesus, no, this old body which has too many holes, and it must be filled. And I tried working on it today, and I don't know what it was originally painted with, but whatever I sprayed on turned the original stuff into putty, and it was a disgusting mess. So I had to strip it all off, and I kind of scraped as much as I could off. Anyway, that's turned me into a wrung out wet rag. So yeah, so originally my plan was to come to this guitar with a hazmat suit and gloves and stuff, but we can pretend. Dramatic music, etc. And this comes from eBay, the land of eBay, and it's a very, well, an old Westone, but that's an interesting little feature there. Does it fit? Yes, it fits in the case. If you just cut a piece of the case out, who cares? Everything's fine. And so we have a kind of quick close-up view of what we've got here. We've got a Westone Thunder II A. I think A stands for active. With the strings, one of the strings, the low E, written the wrong way, but it's lefty as well. So we have some serious grime here from the olden days, and this belongs to Martin's brother. Martin and his brother, both left-handed players, and so this has come from eBay. And the ask is, can I set this up, clean this up, and set it up and get it playing nicely? And my reply is, yeah, let's see what's right and wrong about it first, because we don't really know. Now, by the way, in this heat yesterday, my film camera, that thing, gave up completely. Well, they've even got the bit of the case still in there. That's very kind of them. Yeah, so the camera conked out completely, so I expect it to do the same here. So I guess we will be lucky if we just get a quick look at this guitar right now. I am too hot and wrung out, to be honest, to do anything else. So I am just taking you on a guided tour and a bit of a check to see if what works and what doesn't. So this is a Westone Thunder from the Matsumoku factory, I believe, and it's a big, solid, made in Japan, heavy guitar from that era, and they're quality made, they're beautifully made things, huge, chunky things, weighty as anything. And if I recall, having stripped one back not so long ago, because they painted them, they made them from, blimey, dozens of pieces of metal, of wood. And actually what I'm seeing here, I'm seeing some blistering, like this is a laminate over the top of here. It could even be a veneer bending down here, I don't know. But yeah, so they made them from loads of leftover, and I think, if I recall, the one that Adam gave me, which I stripped back and repainted, that had at least 2 layers, if not 3 layers, of about 6 pieces of wood on each layer. It was a huge number of bits of wood, incredible. As you can see here, we've got a really amazing vintage bridge. I don't recall having seen one of these before on a Westone, and I'm sure that loads of people have, but it's a new looking thing to me, as is this. I've not seen this design before, but again, it's, you know, it's a nice little touch. Now these, I'm assuming these are active, because we've got a variety of switches, push, pull, two push pulls and 1 switch, plus the 3-way. Never seen these pickups before. I mean, it's not surprising, I'm no expert on these things, I've only seen a few pass through. And then we've got a compartment on the back, which no doubt, if I take the screws out will reveal two 9-volt batteries, I expect. For the size of the compartment, I would expect it to reveal two, if it's going to give up its secrets. Now the thing with this is, I guess the logic really is that we need to find out more or less what's working, what isn't, or, you know, there you go, two 9-volts tucked in there. We know, I mean, they almost certainly will be dead, but we will have to sort of try and see if anything works. Now, I've no idea at the moment, so we could just begin by plugging it in on the bench. I am absolutely sweltering here, as you can tell, at 31.5 degrees. Well, I'm probably matching the state of this guitar. You know, I'm as sticky and horrible as the guitar is at the moment. But anyway, so the idea will be to figure out, have a look and see what works and what doesn't, and then, assuming the essentials work, if the essentials work, then set it up. The frets look pretty big, even though they're old. They look pretty good. You know, could have some life left in them. Well, it actually plays. That's not a bad start. What do we got? Gain up, tone up, effects, right, volume up. Okay. Suspect that's bypass, that's active. Yikes. Not quite. So, neck pickup not working at the moment. Oh, that could be because it's down. Haha. No. Left-handed, right. Nothing. Bridge. Neck. No, so the bridge, you wouldn't think would be up. Okay, the switch is a bit ropey. So okay, that's tone. Ay. Tone. Volume. Wow. All or nothing volume. Okay, so we've got what appears to be master volume, master tone. I don't know what this one is. Sounds like a split. Okay, so we've got another one here. That's a blend. I see. Okay, that's a blend pot. So master volume, master tone, blend pot between the two pickups. No, well, hang on. No, it can't be. Blend between what, active and passive? Who knows? Because we won't know until we've got some working batteries in there. That's interesting. I suppose a bit of online research will probably turn up what on earth it does. So volume, tone, some kind of split, probably series or phase, a detente switch, so there's a blending thing going on there between something and something, and that's not working at all. Well, interesting. So that's the electrics. We don't really know what is going on. There's an extra thing attached there, so I don't quite know what that is. Something, is that another battery compartment hanging from the inside of the cover? We shall see. Why we'd have another one in there, who knows. So this is either something attached to it. Yes. Whoa, okay. Holy moly. Right, so we've got a little active-y thing that probably is what comes on, should come on when the thing's fired up. Well, would you look at that. Blimey, I am so hot, it's not funny. So that's I guess that's the boosty preamp. Well, you know, the yeah, the active aspect of it. This one's just a blend pot. There's two switches, and this little switch here. Well, I guess that would be power to this little unit. So it's a little preamp rather than an active. Well, I suppose that's what an active thing is, isn't it? And we've got a. I don't know though. We've got the. Don't worry about my thumb. We have here. The power is switched on by the jack plug going through there, so there's a power switch as well by the looks of it. But then we've got a switch here turning something on. Here. What kind of switch is that? I wonder. So that was switched. There was nothing when that was switched one way, and it played when it was switched the other. And I'm making an assumption here. Sorry about this. I always make assumptions. Never a good thing. So let's put that in for a minute. If we take the batteries out, I'm assuming, and it's never a smart thing to do. I'm assuming that doesn't work anyway. That's why there wasn't one in there. I'm assuming that when I switched it and it came on, that was a bypass. Right? However, it might not be the case, because it may be that it comes on, maybe with the batteries in here may be good, in which case I'm making assumptions that don't pan out. So one way to know that is if we take the batteries out and the same thing happens again, and we know that the assessment was correct, that batteries are dead and the switch on position isn't going to do anything because the batteries are dead. So, but you can't assume that. So yes, you can. Those are properly dead, corroded to hell, fallen apart. Yeah. Okay. We'll stop that one right there. We'll need some more clips. That's actually taken part of the battery with it. So this has been sat somewhere for a very long time. So we'll need to replace those because they're all corroded to hell, bits falling off them. So that's a first. So I think the first thing we'll do is we'll get out and about and do some research into this beast. Let's have just a quick look. I'm not focusing the camera on me because I am literally, as I said, the most disgustingly sweaty creature on earth. There's a tiny bit of relief. Oh, tiny bit of relief. I always have I'm going to cut these strings off because they're just too disgusting. I always have the sort of view that we need to know a couple of things straight away. Obviously there's a complex electronics thing going on there. These strings will not have been off in years until now. They've gone flying around the world. Ding. Losing bits of alien string in the laboratory. It's not good. Off comes the nut, and there's a shim under there in pieces. Yikes. That's okay. Ooh. Go home, wash hands. Go home, jump in shower. Oh, look, somebody's locked the strings again. Yeah, so I think what I'll just check just now is I'll adjust the truss rod and see that it is working, or make sure, check whether it's working or not. Because if it is, then it's worth continuing with. If not, who knows? These are decades old strings that have been sat there in its case. Bless it. With horrible tied up things which really hateful way of doing things. Look at this. I'm going to find a way of cutting it because that isn't going to work. So it's a bit annoying because had the encore business worked out, I was hoping to finish the spraying tonight, but I've just been put back. As simple as that. There's no way around it. I can't spray with that going on, so it's been stripped back again, and I'll start from the beginning. What I can see is that the guitar's had somebody's sprayed, a previous owner has sprayed directly on top of the poly. They've sprayed straight on top of poly with, I guess, some sort of car paint or something, which has never fully, looks like it's still remained soft because it may have not dried out between coats or something. Anyway, so it stayed in this sort of sticky stuff. It's just about worked and done its job, and then I've come and tried to make it something else stick to it. Oh my god, these are knackered. It's such a shame in a way, and they're kind of, they're low but they're playable, I suppose. Just bear with me a second. Yeah, I gotta cut these off, haven't I, really? Because they're just gonna make a corroded mess. I'm just gonna adjust the truss rod if I can. Undo, tiny bit of relief, maybe, possibly. As much as I can do it up. Yeah, sort of. Yeah, not all of the neck's responding, but some of it is. I'm going to find the right ones. So where is the 5mm, 1mm one? That's a 5mm. There it is. So I'm going to put it under a bit of heavy strain. Yeah, I guess that's a bit of back bow. Yeah. Okay. Let's relieve its stress. Okay. So truss rod works. Let's put this rotten those rotten things, batteries back in there for the time, or the clips I should say, back in there for the time being. I think what I'll do is I'll also do some measuring of the frets, because actually this is I'm not sure, I mean Martin don't think is not sure if he has experience of Westones, so I think part of what he was wondering is, you know, what sort of guitar is it? Is it worth keeping? And actually I think they've got great necks, so I totally think they're worth keeping, and I think they're worth refretting as well. That would personally, what this needs is that, judging by the condition of these frets, but it's entirely up to him, or up to Martin's brother. So I will report what I find. Truss rod works, the neck, the frets look absolutely minging, and by the time that they've been levelled or treated and levelled a little tiny bit, who knows what's going to be left of them. I mean, the levelling, as you know, doesn't take that much off, but wow. What a great old thing. Perfectly usable. Yeah, so we've got a problem with this pickup. We don't know if that's working. I suspect it's more likely to be something in the cavity than anything, or at the switch. Let's have a look at the height on the, as far as I can tell. This is not a very accurate measure. Yes, you can see how absolutely soaked I am. 0. 120, 126, 130, 125, 126, 124, 137, don't believe that one, but 112, 128, 113, 119, 116. I'm going to say this ranges between 115 and 125, which is not very high, but it's also not dead. 125, 115 and 125. 115, 125 in the mills department. And that's I'm just an average with my not very accurate thing. So I suspect we'll end up is really somewhere in the middle, about 120, which is okay, I guess. Okay, well, that's the start point anyway. All right, 120. Truss rod works. Frets are just about doable, but I suspect that the wiring is going to be a little bit of a challenge because it's it's complicated. It's complicated. Tuners appear to work, and otherwise, reasonably good condition. That will polish up nicely. There's a couple of dings in the neck that are annoyingly feelable, but again, not the end of the world at all. So there we have it. The Westone Thunder II A. Going to go on a search. Westone. It's got its own little named bridge. Wow, it's so worn out. I mean, I saw something almost as worn as this in a marketplace earlier on. But could probably replace these with modern saddles. It might be possible. I don't know. I'm guessing. But there we are. Vintage. Right, I think that's going to go back into its special case for the time being, and I'll go and kind of check in with Martin and tell him what I found. I think I'll just look at one more thing before I go, see if there's any obvious disconnections here at the switch, just to help me on my way. So the battery's being dead and one side of it working. That tells me that it's clearly the active part that's dead. 1, 2, 3, that all looks sort of okay-ish. Very tight fit as well. Nothing too unusual there. Right, okay, well, that's that. I will put it back in its unusual case, and we will get onto it in the week, or sometime in the week when I've decided what's going to happen, or when we've decided what's going to happen. Okay, let me go and wash my hands and go and have a shower. Not just because of this guitar, but because it's boiling hot. What are we doing now in temperature? Yeah, we're still at 31.5 degrees. I mean, that's quite something, isn't it? Shame I've got nothing immediately. I need spray. Damn! Right, see you later. Hello, this is a restart. My task with this blue Westone is to, first and foremost, try and figure out, you are recording, aren't you? Yeah, that's important. Try to figure out what on earth is going on in here. Well, I don't care too much what's going on there. What I care is whether the pickups work first, and then why both aren't working when I tried it, tested it. So it seemed like the neck pickup wasn't coming through to the output. So what I've just had a little play around at, which I'm afraid you missed, but I'll do it again, is I was tracking through what was what. So we have got this one here is the wire from the neck pickup, and out of this one, strangely, comes two wires really, the red and the white. Out of this one, and the red sorry, the white, which I'm going to call hot, right? Just because it doesn't really matter which way around it is for a 2-wire, right? But the white one gets connected to a red one, which goes into the wire that goes up to the switch and comes out the switch as red. So I know that that one is out there on the switch. You can't see me. But if I touch that red one at the switch, which I'm calling this hot here, which becomes red and goes back up through this black here, if I take a point contact of that at the switch, and then I touch the top of here, I get a reading of 10.8. If I then do the same color coding on the bridge brown, which is the wire from the bridge pickup, and I take the white of that one and the white of that one, and I call it the where is it? There's the white. I call it the hot. It's that one there, and I touch it on there, and I get 11.20, 11.21. So we've got 10.8 and 11.21 for the neck and bridge respectively, which sounds about right. But what we know is, or suspect is, they're not getting, the neck somehow isn't coming through in the mix. Now there's several things that, well, they're not several, there are a couple of problems, one of which is that we've got corroded contacts in here. And the problem with that is what I don't know about this guitar is, does it have a true bypass, or does everything go through this preamp EQ thing all the time? And for example, I mean, there are some guitars I've come across that just die when you run out of batteries, for example. So I don't know if you can see it, but these are corroded. We've got to throw these away. So I've got to find 2 more of these 9-volt. I should order them actually. Get some more of these 9-volt clips. Join them to here. I'd rather do that than trace them all the way through there. So we'll join them at the ends here. So the first thing I'll do is chop these off. We've got to find some clips. I may have 2 here. Join them, and then we've got to hook up some batteries to see if anything works better. But I think we ought to do it one at a time, so we know which pair goes with where. But I'm taking those off because they've already corroded completely. Now to join them up, I have to go on a hunt for said little clips, which may be easier said than done. Well, there's one. Okay, not so bad. Let's try and find another one. It's somewhere in there's a broken one or cut one. It's a bit of a mess of old wiry parts to go through. So I cannot immediately spot a pair of them, which means I can have a look in the other department where they may be. And a similar dig. There's one. Come on. Alright, so we've got 2 between us, 3, but I'm still going to have to get the soldering iron out and stuff. So there's 3, they're all a bit different. There's 3, that one and that one got most wire on them. That one has broken off a bit short, or been cut a bit short. So I'm going to need to solder these with a little bit of shrink cable, but I also need to strip the wires back a little bit, so there's a bit of fiddling and faddling around. So I've got to do that. That's sort of probably best off camera, but it leaves me still not knowing. But what I would hope to be able to do is put in some batteries and give myself a chance at least of testing it with batteries in, and it'd be great to find out that everything worked as soon as there were good batteries, because what I do know is that when I tested it first, because of the corruption as well, because of all the corrosion, it was obvious that this part of it wasn't working at all. But as I say, I have had guitars in the past, or I've worked on guitars in the past, where you literally it wouldn't play, and one was a Fender, by the way, wouldn't play if you had, sorry, I'm thinking and doing things, it wouldn't play if the battery was run out. The thing would go dead. There was no bypass, which struck me as rather stupid. So I'm going to need to cut down some of these little shrink tubes and have them ready. But that's a sort of simpler way of fixing this. And what we would do is we'd put one on each one of these first before we made any connections, so that we can hopefully, it's probably easier to solder them first and then try and attach them together, because you know they're a bit sort of the threads are a bit akimbo at the moment, but equally you can sort of you can get them stuck in your thumb. I mean, there's one way of getting them together, and the same applies here. And I'm going to have to take them over to the soldering iron in a minute. So that's what I'll do, is I'll get this hooked up. Then of course the next thing you don't fully know is where how good the batteries are. I've got some there which I don't know if they work. I've got one chargeable one, rechargeable one, which again I don't know how well it's going to work. So it's all a bit too many variables for my liking when you suddenly have a 18 volt battery thing going on. I think the ones there may have come out of JT's L Blue, in which case it might be a bit of a lucky break, because they may well be usable. So this is not ideal, but you can't see what I'm doing because I'm being useless with the camera. So there's a couple of sort of twisted together wires which I can then solder, and then we can heat shrink those, and I can do the same here. I'm just trying to, while doing this, I'm just trying to pull this through as much as possible. The anchor points inside this are long since sort of worn out, so they're not, the wood's split and everything, so they're not the strongest gripping things in the world. But I'll just put a couple of these screws back in for a minute. So again, while we're here, I can do this one as well. So they're corroded to hell, so that's why they're coming off. Don't want to leave them in. Technically we don't need all of this wire, but I want a little bit more rather than less, in simple terms. So I suppose if I turn on the soldering iron down here, that would help. There it is. Yes, so I've got to go and do a Zoom call at home at 8, so I haven't got the longest while. So again, the same sort of principle applies here. We'll put the shrink things on first before we do them up together. This is where I'm struggling with a bit of lack of room to strip back or do anything. Sort of at a marginal amount now. Had a funny, weird experience today. I came across some video. I don't quite know why, how. I was looking at something. I think it was a suggested video, and I do watch the Mars rovers and astro stuff, like a lot of people do, I'm sure. Anyway, it showed me a sort of forensic frame-by-frame view of the Arecibo telescope structure collapsing in, I forgot where it is, Paraguay? Anyway, it was really strange because I didn't know that thing had fallen down. So I was treated to the spectacle of watching this great big bowl-shaped thing, but more importantly the structure that hangs over it, that does the collecting of the X-ray signals and so on. Watching it all tumble to bits and fall into the dish, I should say, very strange to see something and thinking, how didn't I know that happened? And then thinking, I suppose, why would I know, really? Okay, so that could be ready for taking over there and doing that too, while at the same time, right, better just move that out of the way and put the neck pickup back in place the correct way around. Let's just fix that in. The thing is, Martin, when I said that, you know, this was seemed to be not playing or not sending the neck pickup signal through, he said, well, you know, get it sort of, if you can't get it to work at all, rig it up sort of a standard way, which, hang on a sec, I'll leave you looking at this a minute while I do a quick tidy up. Yeah, so he said, you know, consider just putting it back to normal operation, and that's a bit tricky because there is no normal operation for this. You know, it's got a load of functionality, and the only alternative I've got really is to, if it's not going to work this way, then really all I can do is turn it into a 2-humbucker guitar with some other functionality. But what we'd have to decide from scratch, because we've got a lot of micro screw holes kind of sitting around doing nothing. So that's a bit of an oddity, and it's a shame because you know, it's clearly some sort of historical type of wiring that this was known for. I'm just going to put you up there a bit. You might sink down while I'm doing this, but so this is, while this may look like a big deal, all I'm doing here, what I hope to be doing here, is to solder these wires together and then heat shrink them. So the thing to do, as I found out the hard way many times, is to keep your darned keep your heat shrink well away from your the bit you're soldering, because otherwise all that happens is you end up kind of heating the shrink up beforehand, which you don't want to do. So at the moment I'm missing, here it is. So let's see what we can do hooking these up together. Yes, anyway, so I watched this, I think, legendary observatory telescope falling to bits and crashing into the bowl, which is weird. But it was evident that it was so old, you know, that the structure, the wires holding it up, just sort of gave way. Well, they'd been giving way over time, and it had been observed. One of the big clusters of cables had broken the year before or something, so people knew it was in trouble. And amazingly, the day it parted and gave way altogether, they had a drone flying over, which captured the exact moment when the whole thing sort of split apart and fell to bits. Right, so the slight problem here, of course, is getting heat onto here, and enough to do the thing, but keeping it relatively safely away from the finish. Try and get one end of it, and then you should be able to hold it up and come at it mostly underneath like that. Okay, and just keep that one out of the way while I line up the next one, which is similarly difficult. But we want to get two ends sort of warmed up. How about you duck down in there for a minute? Right, there are our two things done up again. Now, what I don't know is what there is in the way of... Yep, there looks to be some juice in these. He did the old tongue test. So let's borrow these for the time being. And then we'll see if we get any joy. Now this, just wait 1 second. Let's take this off and pull some of this back through, which we don't need. Because we don't need it in the battery case, really. We've got much more room in the other place. There we go. So, not exactly the best layout in the universe, but sort of. Come on, coax it through a bit. Through you go. Not ideal. I'll just leave it running like that for the time being, and we'll worry about squeezing it a bit further down later on. So that's a live circuit. Now this, I believe this needs a jack socket, a jack plug-in to make it switch it on. So we'll connect it to the lamp and see if we can make the pickups make some semblance of noise whilst turning it on. Never quite understood. This appears to have an on at the switch and then also an on or some switch there, and I haven't quite worked out what it was. Okay. I suppose I need something that's ferrous, he says, having thrown all the old blades out of the way. It's a new one. Let's wipe the oil off it. Okay, left-handed, so full open. Maybe it was the neck. Neck already works. Oh, of course, right. Oh, right. Hold on. Okay, so boost off, EQ boost on, that's good. That's on, that's good. On, boosted, volume, tone as suggested, EQ when boosted. Right, okay, good. So what's faulty is the switch. Good. Woo! I like it. I'm very pleased. That's a result. That is a good result. Right, let's go back up to the bench. Right, I'm sort of going to nearly just about park it here for a minute. So that's pretty good news. So with those new clips and the circuit activated, these are both working. That's faulty switch, so that's the kind of least complicated bit in the whole shebang. So we can start by removing that with a view to replacing it. I'll have to get another one ordered, but this will be bin time, which is no big deal really. Hurrah! So let's get the batteries out here. We know that side of things is working, if I can actually squeeze them out. Not as easy as it looks, I'm afraid. It's such a tight fit. I also don't think these were built in the days of Duracell batteries, so they don't fit in very well. Duracell batteries, modern Duracells, are much thicker than the original, or quite a bit thicker than the original 9 volts. Good, good, good. I'm going to replace that as well for the time being, so it doesn't get lost. And then we can set about getting a replacement for this. That doesn't belong, these belong there. Yeah, we can get a replacement for the switch. So I'm pretty confident that everything else is going to work. So it's just now a matter of getting that switch and then doing a full setup and giving this a complete clean up as we go along, because it is mighty grubby. Now I may want to take this back to the bench for the extraction because there's so little room. That's the problem with this, you end up with very little room to play with. Let me just check something. How is it? Oh well, I'll have to refigure it out. I can't remember which way up it was now. I know that the red was down there, wasn't it? Yeah, red was at the bottom. Let's just make a note of that so I don't get confused. So that was green, white and red with the earth there. Green, white and red with the earth there. Right, so I need to unhook this because I've got very little wire to play with. So take you back to the bench. And then I think what I'll do is I'll just start cleaning this up once I've got these things unhooked. And probably not much exciting for the video. Lost blue pliers. Got blue pliers. What have you got on the end of here? Something's smoking. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, you can switch off now because that's all the soldering we want done for now. Okay, that's a pretty short fuse to be working with, but we can probably do it. Okay, so what I will do now is I'm going to take off the remainder of the components, everything I can, and lift, also including lifting the pickups gently, because I want to clean all the way around here with as much off as possible. But that's just a sort of cosmetic cleanup. And then I'm going to get stuck into this neck and the rest of the body. So it's just going to be cleaning and scraping some finger goo. So I won't show it on camera. But yeah, we'll get going. Woo! Success. Well, nearly. Here we are, gentlemen and ladies. Woohoo! Westone. Switch, new switch, fitted with wiring schema in place. I'm also proud to present some surface repairs, some ding repairs that, I don't know if you can see, but they are hidden underneath a layer of, well, they're flush, put it that way. So 2 big dings, which are now, as you can tell by the reflection, I mean there's a tiny little mark there you can see because you get a little air bubble occasionally, but by and large that's covered over and smoothed back, so you will not feel those when playing. So that's a little thank you, freebie thank you for the business, because Martin and his brother have brought me quite a few guitars recently. So that's my little thank you kind of gift back. Right, so we are on an interesting stage of things now. So first of all, I'm going to fit this little thing back in here. We're going to do it up with what kind of screws? It's hard to tell. 2 dome ones, 3 dome ones, probably for the top thing. So 2 of these for this thing. Right. Come back you here. You charged? I bet you are. So what we've got to do today is to move on now to the business of leveling or cleaning up and possibly leveling the frets. So this is a sort of an interesting part of the thing because they are pretty filthy. As you can see, compared to before, I've taken all the filth off the fretboard, fingerboard, so it's really nice and clean now. And what we have to do now is do some treatment to these frets, which as you can see are in a state. So to do that we're going to have to put the, sorry about this, whoops, we're going to have to put the tuners back on. Clang. And while we're putting the tuners back on, I suppose, well I don't suppose anything, it would be a good idea to give them a little bit of a clean over as we go. So let me get the stuff, the name of naphtha, and we'll get kind of a bit of a wet soaked rag going on here. Difficult to, it's not like something you can chuck these in a container full of stuff and leave them. You have to sort of do them by hand as much as you're going to clean up. So I can see lots of nicotine coming off these, I've got to say. It's pretty disgusting. Somebody just turned up at the industrial estate with a van and they've just thrown open the back door. I was half expecting to see some people come trotting out the back. It's a bit of an out of the way place. So yeah, we've got what is definitely some very nicotine-y type tuners. So I'm obviously they're not going to be pristine clean, but I'll do my best. Now where have I put the? Oh yeah, there it is. I'll do my best to get the obvious grime off so that they're hygienic, shall we say, to handle. But I'm not going to attempt to make them into brand new things because that's something they won't be. I'm also got a sort of question of what's going to happen when we get to this bridge because it's pretty filthy, and I don't think, so looking at it, it's got a lot of blistering on the chrome, so that isn't going to really clean up. At the same time, it's also covered in the same sort of smoky grime as the rest of these chrome parts, so it wouldn't hurt if we can get some of that off. That would be a nice thing. So this is not a quick process because you've got to do each one individually. But it'd be nice if you could drop them all in just a pot of something and leave them to soak, but I don't think you can. Let's get a thicker bit of cloth here. Yes, so I did a couple of videos uploads today because I finished both of Ron's ES339s over the last day or two. So he came and picked them up today, and I was just uploading the videos when he arrived, so that's good timing. But I noticed on those that the sound is still quite low, and it's partly because I don't talk very loud anyway, and it's not because I'm not allowed to, because here I could shout all evening if I wanted to, but that's not my kind of natural way of being, so it would feel a bit odd to do that. So yeah, I'm a bit of a quiety. So still I have to try and speak a bit louder. There are sort of effects you can put on, or filters you can put onto the sound on Final Cut Pro, which will boost it all up, I think, to a sort of standard level. But it is a bit of an artificial thing, that, and it makes it all sort of, any quiet spots then get boosted up as well, and it all becomes a bit sort of. So I don't know. I think it's if you've got headphones on and you're watching this stuff, then fine. But if if you're on a train or something and I go quiet, then I'm sorry, forgive me. these are very grimy, so what I'm doing really here is taking off the basic top layer of, you can see it, a yellow sort of nicotine finish. So pretty much by the time we've done the fret leveling on this and cleaned these frets up, it will be a much cleaner beast. These tops of the posts and the washers here aren't cleaned up, they're sort of as they were, but they're not something you handle, so I'm not too worried. Okay, so yeah, this it is a filthy old thing. It's sort of pretty worn as well, so the saddles are a bit crapped out. I think I'm going to just go with it as it is. I'm not going to try and refurbish it or anything, because that's not really part of the deal here, but it's a nice vintage old thing, and to refurbish it would be quite a nice thing to do, but it would possibly require some new saddles finding from some other types of tuners, no, not tuners, bridge. I got a feeling that they would be pretty standard actually, and you could get away with fitting some new standard ones. Let's see what we can see. Right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to keep this stuff handy. I suppose we could always wrap the bridge in this, but I don't really think it's going to do anything. Screws. Now, I think what I would like in this, I don't know, I sort of like the old-fashioned torque screwdriver for this sort of thing, although the other one actually has a sort of kind of torque built in. It's slightly odd. It sort of stops, but I know it isn't really a torque setting, but it sort of behaves like one, so maybe it is. I just don't know about it. Anyway, so yeah, next stage, we're going to string up with some Harley Benton 9s, although this is going to have 10s on in the end. I'm not sure I've got any Harley Benton 10s, but I'll put some 9s on the sacrificial strings. We'll get it tensioned up, and then we'll get the frets leveled. And the fun part is that the good old-fashioned banana tool is going to really let us know what the state of the frets are, and I always enjoy that bit of finding out along the way. So I'm going to just tighten these up. What day is it today? We're Wednesday, is it? Yeah, I think so. Hopefully on Friday or Saturday my eldest boy is going to come down and stay for a few days. Looking forward to that. So obviously the next thing we've got to do, we have to put a nut on. Now this is a tusk nut, but I've got a left-handed tusk nut. Obviously it's not going to be adjustable in this case. It could be, but I'll go with the black one because it suits the black of the plastic down here and the tip of the switch and so on. So I think we're better off with black, but it's tusk and that's the main thing, and so I want to just make sure that it's going to sit here nice and flat. There's quite a lot of glue residue knocking about on this, on the end of the fretboard, and then just want to see, just get a sort of idea of what's level here and what isn't. Now it'll sort of show me that by what it's cutting up here and what it isn't. Not too bad actually. So when it comes down to it, that will be, sorry, it's not a very good view. Right, it's not a very square corner, and that's the first thing. the angle isn't very clean cut. Certainly not. Well, I don't know. Let's have a look. Actually, it's probably this that isn't square enough. So what I'll do, because this was used on something before and I've reclaimed it. So what I'll do here, first of all, is let's sand this back down to a 90 degree. Now I know I've got a bit of leeway to go here, so I can afford to put some pressure on it and remove some material. I want it closer to a 90 degree. Getting better. A little better since you've been mine. Do, 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 do. Yeah, that's better. Right, so it's still too tall. Now the problem with this is that if I go and just randomly sand away, I'll obviously end up being too low randomly. So I think what I need to do is, once I've got it dead flat in a way I'm happy with, which is that, I think next stage I need to do a bit of careful measuring, and I'll be able to see exactly, exactly what I'll need to take off. However, I don't have to do that immediately. I can have this sort of sitting on here. What I think I will do at this point is I will start by putting some marker pen on these frets. Now I can see loads of grooves from years of playing. I think I said before in the beginning of this, if this was my guitar I would be refretting it without a doubt, because I think these Westones are worth it, simple as that. And you know, this is about at the limit of what I think I can do to clean up these frets. So let's have a sort of quick feel of this bridge. For now, I'll probably get some of the grime off it with a bit of some rubbing, but not everything. You can see it is corroded, and we could get a toothbrush on it and stuff like that, but again we won't really be able to do much because of this bubbled chrome and stuff like that, so it's a limit to what we can do with it in the short term. But as long as it works, I think that's the main thing, and in this case, as long as we've got most of the surface nicotine off so it doesn't feel horrible to touch it, you know, that's a little bit better. I think originally this was sitting, I can't remember which way around it was now, but I think it doesn't really matter, but we could go keep it in the way it is just now. So same with this, just get a bit of the grime off here, the things we have to touch. And then the final bit I would say is, so you can't see it, sorry about this view, get some grime off this little scratch plate affair here, and that then goes in the bin because it's evil. Right, so let's sort of zoom out and see what we can see a minute. Right, nut at the end, things all painted. This bit on here, we might as well put these bits back so that we simply just don't lose any. 3 of those, 2 of those, quite large. Oh, those go in there. See, that doesn't overpower it. It's quite clever. So we've got 1 of those there, 3 of those little there. So I'm short of 2 little black screws. I'm going to have to go hunting through my spares. 1 there for now, and 1 there. And basically we've got 3 for the Westone. Well, there's one that's not really the right one. So we've got a couple of spares, but they're definitely not correct. we could put them up. Ooh, we could put them up there and use these black ones down here. But again, they're not the right screws. So we'll see if we can find some others. Okay, first things first. In go the stop bar pieces. Get that right down. Next, in go the bridge posts. Down. It's getting quite humid in here. And then we'll go, what did we say, forwards. Well, we need to get where we can get the screws, so I think we'll have to leave it forwards this way, so we have room. And is that too high? That's too high. That's a bit too low. So let's bring that up about the same, and we'll see where we go from there. Alright, so set of 9s to be thrown away shortly afterwards. So I think I'll start with the 4th and 3rd. I seem to be missing some in here. Thank you. 4th and 3rd, just to keep the nut on approximately roughly, if I can. So how does this one work again? Something like that. Okay, hold it there for a minute. So that's the 4th and 3rd. I'll open the window because I'm getting warm. Yes. So where are we at? Well, we are getting this one done, but Martin will be leaving this one here for a couple more weeks, picking it up down the line a little bit. So once this one's done, then I'm moving on to complete Rob's Encore, the one hanging up on the thing there. And after that, or alongside that, I'll be getting onto JT's Candy Apple Red, Squire, Jaguar and the Fender Mustang. Those are 2 refinishes that I did, which will be time to put them together, reassemble them. So there isn't, theoretically there's not too much to do in terms of setup, but the Mustang will probably come together quite easily, but the Jaguar has a sort of, to get it apart you have to basically take apart, cut the wiring, so it's a bit of a pain to get it back together again. You have to connect a load of things up or splice a load of wires, because it's designed so that the wires go through little tunnels rather than through channels that you can kind of reach, if you get what I mean. So in other words, you have to cut them to get the components all out of the guitar. So I've had to wire or mark them up so I know which goes to which without having to consult a very complicated Jaguar wiring diagram. Okay, now these are obviously going to be sitting up too high right now because the nut is currently too high. But while we're here, or after the fret leveling part of things, or before fret leveling even, I can use the strings on here as a look, look at me doing this right-handed. I am such a plonker. It's a left-handed guitar. Didn't anybody notice this? Holy cow. Got these all the wrong way round. Lucky they're sacrificial strings, isn't it? Now I'm doing this the right way round finally. Thanks, man. I love it when you do that. Didn't anyone notice that? do me head in. Right, I'll put the... Oh, no, I won't put, I'll put the first on, because I can. And then everything else will have to move. Silly me. Hopefully these Harley Benton strings will survive it. You just never know. They're not the strongest things in the world. We get bends and crimps in all the wrong places now, thanks to my silly brain offness. But it'll be alright for fret leveling and nut tweaking. Okay, off you come. 5. Got to go on to your new home 5. Actually, it should be about the same length, really. Beep beep. So yes, a couple of candy apple red guitars and also a Trekkie 6, which is the other candy apple red, oh bloody hell, build. All of those to finish. This is driving me mad. Driving me mad, it's driving me mad. Do 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 do. She's so heavy. Okay, D has to come off and change over. I swap with the G, which is also in the wrong place. Yes, yes, candy apple red. 3 candy apple reds, and actually I think JT and I agreed that the strat that I'm currently making for him is also going to be a candy apple red, since we've got probably just enough to get that going. We might need another tin of clear red. We'll rat it, but it's just as easy to use the rest up and just append a tin of the right stuff on the end, which is all we need to do. So it will be his 3rd candy apple construction. But I've got to get the body carves cut and everything, so which I'm not at yet. So I was hoping to do a bit of that tonight after this, depending on timings, but I don't think I'll be able to do it because I've got to get to the shop before that closes to get some cat food, because we've not quite managed to get around to doing grocery shopping recently, so the cats end up at risk of starvation. After all, we can survive it because we've got plenty of spare tyres, but the cats, bless them, they need food every day. Okay, now we just got the B to get in order now. Will finally be the right way round. Yes, so time wise I've got till latest 9:30, 9:15. So I've got a little bit of time. This Westone, I just noticed again, has got a buckled plate here, so we could make a little heated thing and squish it, heat it. I did that yesterday with one of Ron's ES339, one of his truss rod covers. Unfortunately, the vice I squeezed it in after I'd warmed it had put a little bit of an imprint on it. So while it was flatter than it was also a little bit sort of marked, but not a big deal. So what I would have to do is just make sure for this larger scratch plate, I've got to make sure that I've got 2 flat pieces of either timber or possibly plastic or something that will do the job. Okay, so strings on. Now what I'll do is I'm just going to give these a little pull. Oh God, what happened there? That's Did something break off there? That's terrible. So that's the D string, not wound on enough for some blasted reason, and that said goodbye, I ain't playing the game. So, and that's that out of the way. So total waste of time. Let's try and find one from somewhere else that will do the job now. Again, I can never tell if they're long enough or whatever they were taken from. What do we want? The D, don't we? These look too big, but they'll do for now. Come on, D. D. Looks like all of the rest is going to go in the bin, and I don't know why bother, because that's too short as well. Goodbye. In the bin with you. Come on, give me a D. 13, no. 17, no. 52, no. What's this one? 42, no. Why has it gone all humid? 6th, 4th, 3rd, 4th. Thank you. Damn it. I didn't realise I didn't wind that around enough. I thought I did the usual thing with it, but maybe I must not have done. Well, only a string wasted, ain't no big deal. Right, so we just want an approximate tuning just to see where the strings lie. Good. What I'll do now is just have a look at the gap under here and then see how much I need to take off. What's my complete collection here? Is that, did I say that's 1? It's not a millimetre, is it? No, it's 0.6. Why don't I call that anything other than that? What's wrong with me? 0.4, 0.6. Okay, so 60, 40, 130, 145, 165, 190, 190. Close. 190. Let's take off 0.15. Okay, so 190 minus 0.15 is 175. 1.75 too high, and I reckon it's the same on that side. 1.75 too high. Let's make a note of that. 1.75 mils too high. So we want to leave a 3 millimeters action, so we want to take off 1.3. 145. So let's call it 135 to be on the safe side. So push this out of the way. So we're looking for 135 reduction. Now this is never going to be the most exact thing in the world, so we've just got to be sort of careful and try and get as close as we can to it. See the line? I can see the line. It's quite a lot. How do we get it? It's on black, so it's a little bit difficult to keep an eye on. I'm going to try and take it off with start with using the Shinto thingy, if I can hold it in place. We get a bit of the material off there to start with, although it doesn't hold the nut very well because it's not that cooperative shape really. Will it stay there? Will you stay there? Let's see if I can hold it in place. Yeah, maybe. Right, let's take some of this off. Sorry about the view for a minute. I'm just trying to get rid of some bulk material. Everything wobbling. Rubbish desk. Well, that's rubbish. It's tilted in there because I can't hold it still enough. I'll just have to do it by hand. I could possibly do it with a bit of this. Hold on a second. Sorry. To do this. Very difficult to see what you're doing here, sadly. What I like to do is when I get closer like this is to then replace it and then be in a position to check it physically, and then when we work out how much to take off, do it by measuring the nut this time rather than drawing a line on it, because it ends up getting down to being very small fractions. So we're nearly there on both sides. We're on a good 90 degrees. I'm just going to keep going a little bit, nice and centrally pressured, so we just get very close to where we want to be. If we were lucky, we'd get right on the mark and we just put the nut back in and that would be all, but highly unlikely. So put it back in. This is where I find out my maths or my calculations are absolute rubbish and I've cut far too much off. And it's very common that I do that without fully understanding why. So let's tighten the middle one up first, keep it on. Not far off actually. That's actually spot on. Woohoo! So I'm going to use that exactly as it is for my fret leveling. So let's just check what we've got at either end. We're going to look for the last fret action. Sorry about, I don't know what the view's like. I've been remiss and not paying attention to you enough. Got me cold cup of tea. Sorry. Over there. So I'm going to set up the action to my usual low stretch target, as I would say, and just see what we can get. That's 1.5. Not a lot of break angle. Well, actually it's fine, but it's less than a Les Paul because it's a different construction. But okay, let's have a look. 1.5 will do for now. Okay, so there's the sort of stretch target, which will now be out of tune again. That's what we're aiming for. Brilliant. Okay, so here we go. We're going to now attempt to level these old frets with the U channel beam, which is the most accurate of all of my, well, kind of my favourite at the moment of my truss rods, but it's a great diagnostic to tell me what's going on with the neck. So let's begin with, just check the spacing, so it's really on this one. Okay, so first of all I'm going to calibrate this. It needs a little bit more curvature. A bit more. Let me just check something, because remember we didn't have a lot of luck with the truss rod on this, so it was kind of stuck at what it was, which is had some relief in it. I thought it was quite alright actually, so I will go with it still. It's acceptable amount. I wouldn't try cranking this truss rod any harder. It sort of worked, but not massively well. So I'm going to calibrate this to there, which is now on the spot, and we're going to go work on the low E track and see what we find. And this is where these little old frets get their first a kiss in with 400 grit. Now the question is, with so little, relatively little fret metal left on these frets, can I guarantee getting rid of all the fret wear, the little grooves? And the answer is simply no. I wouldn't trade off precious fret life at this stage in the life of the frets for a cosmetic outcome, really. Cut, 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 cut. No, 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 cut, 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 cut. So we've got a low spot here. Now, all I really care about is if that little low spot of frets up here, number 16, 17, 18, 19, I only really care about it if they interfere with play. In fact, you can hear how they do. Because they're low, they make the next frets high. So let me just double check what we've got here, because we are on point 1.5. We may or may not be able to get this guitar to do it. So that straight away, that diagnostic aspect told me there's a bunch of low frets up here, and playing into those low frets makes the next one high, next one's high. So playing notes anywhere in there was making them buzz out a little bit. So all I can hope to do is to put a little bit more pressure on the far end, and with a sort of gentle aim of bottoming out this low spot and that's all we can do really. There's no other way around it. The lowness of these frets will be, are they beginning to touch them yet? Yeah, there's two now that's not, well, three. They're just beginning to touch them. But yeah, they will be low because of the characteristic of the neck. I used to think it was because how we squeezed them in or pressed the frets, but make sure I'm not hitting any pickups or anything. No, so it's struggling, you see, because they're low, and it's to do with, I won't be able to see it with the naked eye, but it's to do with a little low dip at that point. Actually, I can see it. It's right there. Usually you can't see it, but the fret, the banana tool shows you it, and that's the beauty of it. It shows you it by revealing the fact that those group of frets there haven't been touched by this nice curved beam. So all we can hope for is a little bit more work here to try and bottom them out. And if we can't get them, if we can't bottom out this little cluster, then I'm afraid we're left with the alternative. The only alternatives really we've got is to compromise, and that means to raise the action very slightly so that they don't buzz that way. Unfortunately, that is the consequence of a dip in the wood, and there's nothing I can do about that unless I was refretting it, in which case I would have an option to smooth it out with a radius block. See, I'm having now to take off a lot of material off these final frets to get this cleaned or cleared up, but that's just the way it has to be, I'm afraid. But I say we may not get it to play cleanly. So it's this low patch. You can see it. 3 frets here, still not touched. These are being hit quite hard. These 3 in a dip, and that is what is making it sound like this. And these aren't. That's a clean note by comparison. So I'll do a little bit more. Well, I don't like the reason I'm doing a little bit more because of where it is, we can afford to hit the final few frets a little bit harder. But it's not my preferred approach. I would rather, well, personally, as I said, I would rather have taken care of this kink in the neck by leveling the frets. By refretting and re-radiusing the board. But that's me. So I'm going to stop there, and if we can't live with that, yeah, we might have to do a little bit more here. If it's no go after this, then I would recommend a tiny raise in the playing action, which is a pity because, but the great diagnostic power of this tool is that it tells you something that basically can't be refuted, and that is this has a dip right here which is limiting the lowness of the action, regardless of how much you level and how much you work the frets. So I'm going to stop there. It's playing okay, but see, it cleans up after that. So limits to what we can do, unfortunately. Going to move on to the A track using the same calibration as the E track. And I'm going to start off by using it very lightly, and I'm going to let it tell me what the frets are doing, what the neck is doing. And I pretty much would expect at this point to see the same information really about the topography of the neck. I would expect to find these low, which they still are. Everything else is cutting, which is great, but we will be still limited, constrained on the A track by the lowness of that little piece of the neck, and that's a wood problem, or a timber problem. See, gets mucky. So a little bit of fret slap all the way along, and then that ditch that it goes into. So I'm going to attempt to treat it very gently in order to let the rod work its curved magic and free up a little bit of space to cure that fret slap, as I would call it. But honestly, to be having to work the frets too much with a guitar of its frets of this lowness and this age doesn't feel great to me. And if the alternative is to sort of crank them up, it's. Now I know that Martin's brother is not such a low playing fiend as Martin, so we can afford to do that. See, that's cleaned up the fret slap, a little tiny bit creeping in there, and then we expect to find it here. So I'm going to do a little bit of pressing down at this far end now, but after that I will kind of up the action a fraction if necessary, and we'll go with that, because like I said, I don't even know Martin's brother's name, but I know enough to know that he plays with a higher action. Now these, as I say, these frets are pretty worn as it is, so I would, if this was mine, I would be wanting to replace them, because it's a great guitar. I mean, there's this every bit worth keeping. The Westones are superb. Okay, I'm gonna go with that because I don't want to do any more on that part of it. I'm going to recalibrate now for the D track. Very often we'll find the relief curve changes just a tiny bit as we move across. It's completely normal for that to happen. That's about right. So we move on and on. Now I wouldn't be surprised if when I come across here that depth of that sunken area maybe has evened out by the time we come across to the treble side of things. Not at all uncommon for it to change that much across the entire radius. I'm just letting it do its thing so I can see what's going on. Like I say, because of the marginalness of the frets, I don't think I'm going to chase out all of the grooves down here, because that would be too expensive in fret metal, and it's always been a principle of mine that I don't do it just for the cosmetic side of it. And to be honest, those grooves don't affect. There we are again. Little ditch. Not bad though. I'll take a little bit more time right up the top here where the low patch is, I think, starting to level out a little bit, which is good. Yeah, so I'm never comfortable making a direct exchange for fret metal for cosmetic, groove improvement, unless somebody specifically asks that because it bugs them so much that that's what they want, and I'll do it. But for me, it's not a great exchange rate. So I prefer to leave a couple of little grooves down here rather than trade out fret life. Truth is, by the time I've crowned, sanded and polished everything out, you'll be hard pushed to spot them anyway, so that's not a real problem. Okay, so now we're across into the G track. Now the G track is critical in this fret leveling process because it's where the high E bends usually end up. So when you bend a high note, in this case on a guitar pushing that way, on a right-handed guitar pushing that way, you're pushing usually your high E's or your B strings up the fret and to the top of the hill into the G track, as I call it, and it's there that you will get a choke out. So when I'm leveling the G track, I want to make sure I want to make sure the strings play, sorry, the notes play, which they do, but what I really want to know is do the E strings make it across into the G track. Now the other thing that tells you you're in the dip here is that these notes will choke out because we're in a dip. This one probably will, the next one probably won't, and the next one will just about play, and then it'll come back. And that's because that's another confirmation that this is a dip, because anything in the dip will be too low and there won't be enough clearance. So that's interesting. So what I'm going to do with this one is I'm going to do a bit more on the G, and I'm going to again concentrate on very light, just holding it in the center and letting the curve do its magic equally in both sides. I want it to have kind of the same effect on both sides of the rod, to address the general fret slap all the way in that track. But then we know that in the G we've got some choking out happening here, and that the low frets here are creating the problem now with the bends. Before, the low frets were causing buzz problems on the low strings, but they will cause a similar problem on the high strings, but even worse, this low spot here will be why the high E bends choke out as they reach the G track. So again, it's a combination of focusing on one thing, focusing on another, and ultimately, once I've done as much as I'm comfortable doing leveling, where's my low spot? So there we are. Now technically we're across where we are. We're in the G track, and it's that E bend is choking out. Now the only way we're going to overcome that would be to raise this up from the 1.2 just a fraction higher, and given that it's Martin's harder hitting brother, he won't mind if there's a bit of a taller action here. And that's 1.5, and that's just over 1.5. So let's see if in the, there you go, that's enough to give us back the bend. I'm going to go with that in the interest of fret metal and not taking any more off. There's plenty taken off already to get where we've got to, so I don't want to cost any more. So I will continue. A bit more curvature on here needed. So we're on to the B now, and then the E after that. And these two are fairly straightforward because in a way all we have to do with these is to make the individual notes play. They very rarely tend to choke off as they bend across unless there's some significantly uneven fret or dip, which we know we've got, so we have to keep an eye on that. But generally speaking, the E and the B aren't quite as critical as the G track, where it lives at the top of its hill, you see. So it's a funny old game. They're all a little bit different. So that's my sort of general leveling, and then I'm going to put a little bit more heft into the space after the trough, and it's cutting it quite well, so that means it's not anywhere near as low as the fingerboard is on that side, or not quite as low I should say. So a definite change across the radius. Okay, I'm good with that. So final track, the high E track. Good calibration. And here we go. Now what I won't really know until a little minute from now will be just how difficult these are to recrown because of the general lowness of them, and obviously I don't want to leave these frets with a flat top. I want to recrown them, but it gets a little bit difficult if there's not enough material in there. Okay, so I'm now generally sort of mapping the curve onto it as well as I can, relatively lightly, and then I will just give it a bit of a push at this end where I know there's potential congestion. What's the time, Mr. Wolf? I've got to get in 2049. I thought that you might have left it clamped overnight. You're going to say? Clamped. I thought you might have left it clamped overnight. I'm going to answer the question right now. It was clamped overnight. Hyphen by string force loading. Love people who think they know. It's all too easy to be know-it-all. Okay, I'm happy with that. We're going to live with that. I would say the only tiny compromise I've had to make is a very, very slight lift of the action. Technically speaking, we could do a little bit at either end, both ends, but actually, as it happens, in discussions, Martin had said numerous times that his brother wasn't a fan of it being so low anyway. So having set the sort of target and aimed for it, I think we can certainly afford to lose or go up a little higher, which kind of fixes the problem. But as you can see, I've had to do a combination of a fair amount of fret leveling. Actually, it isn't that much. It's a reasonable amount of fret leveling on top of what was already flat worn frets. And if I just show you with the close-up in a second, you can see that the action of doing that has not quite got rid of all of the wear grooves, but with my philosophy of not trading wear for art, not trading wear for fret metal where it's not where it's only cosmetic. Come on, do me a favor. You see them? So there's still some grooves visible. And those will polish out quite a lot, but I'm not going to take those frets down more than I have to just get rid of those, okay? That's just how it is. I don't think it's a good transaction. So just I think I will probably call a halt here, get rid of these strings having done their service. What I'll do is, before I call a halt, I'm going to I'll just crown the frets and we'll just see what that tells us. Because the great thing about crowning is it also, I've got bloody coils of string stuck in my t-shirt. The crowning process also tells us a lot about how much metal we actually removed and how much we didn't. So often you can think you've removed tons and then you can discover that it's less than you think. The leveling process itself often shows you how flat the frets were from before, because your first swipe of the bar of the banana fret leveling file seems to take them to a great big flat spot, which of course your fret leveling beam with your 400 grit with one scrape can't have done. So it's usually that it's been leveled before, and that's often a thing that just tells me straight away. So I'm going to just sort of run across the top here and see what I've got, and that's okay-ish. I can see the grooves. I'm working to get the thin line along the top. That's relatively hard work, but and you know that when they're level, what you're often finding is that the edges of this file are riding along the wood, so you get a little bit of a shine going on. Can't really avoid that. The only way you could avoid it would be to cram them by hand. He said, it's falling off. That's another thing you can do quite easily, is drop off. So I'm sort of leaning over now to try and thin down this line on top of the frets. So it's what you tend to have to do when you're down on low frets. So from side to side, and sometimes you can use the fairly unused side of the file, which is quite a good thing to do as well. You tend to end up only using one bit of the file all the time, and so using the straight edge is like a fresh bit of unblunted grit. So not too bad. I mean, you know, they're all fairly flat to begin with, you know, and having done a bit of levelling, I've added to that, obviously. I think we might find some very flat looking ones up here. God, it's a shock when you do that, you end up hitting the table. And you can, if you want to, you can sort of whiz along and quickly do them and come back to them and see what you've got, but I like to just do them one by one. Now, the line is not as thin on the top of these frets as I would ideally like, and that's really because I don't have an option. I've got to, you know, I have to get what I can done, and short of bringing out the manual file, three-sided file, I can't really get it any thinner. But it's enough, it's thin enough to make a pretty good fret. So obviously you can see I'm recrowning a lot more than on some guitars. If you watch the previous video to this, like bronze ES339s, and nowhere near as much recrowning effort going into it. So this could be partly because I've levelled it some, but it also could very well be because it's been flattened before, either through long time playing or previous levellings, and it may be that I'm doing the first recrowning for a long time on some very relatively flat frets. So what we're going to find is these next three are going to hardly need any work at all because they're right down in the dip. There you go. Again, another thing that just tells you exactly what you already knew, or what I already knew from the banana levelling file. Right, tiny bit of work, they're done, because they'd hardly had any contact with the fret levelling beam, because we know that they're in a dip. And here we have a bit more work to do, because we've quite heavily hit on these to make these playable. So well, although I didn't do any carving on JT's L Red guitar body tonight, I did get the plastic nut blanks made for the test rig that I'm making for Vince, who's a customer of mine, who wants he wants me to make him a custom ultra wide 6-string guitar. He's had one from me in the past that I made him from a 7-to-6 conversion, and while it allowed him to play guitar for the first time, you know, over the years he's kind of decided it's still not wide enough. So we're going to make another one, but this one we're going to make from scratch. And because of that, it's, you know, because of the effort and the cost involved, then it's really important that we do some research first with what works for him. And so obviously I can't get to him, and he can't necessarily get to me. So first thing I'm going to do, or first thing we're doing, is I'm sending him a test rig that I've made. Just out of interest, I thought I might show you. So this test rig is going to have 5 pairs of different sized nuts. And let's say, for example, here's one. This is one pair. Help! It's got stuck in there. 1 second. Get it out. Right. So so what we're going to do is this pair will have let's say a string spacing of 60 at this end and 66 at this end, and I'll cut them using a string spacing ruler. I'll make those 2 spacings, but they're a pair. And so what will happen is we'll put the nuts in this little unit here, we'll string it up, and it will go from 60 wide down there, follow along these fake frets down to the thing at the other end and into these tuners. And so that we can put in a pair, like we'll start with 50 at this end, 55 here, and so he'll get to play what's spaced in this direction like a normal strat of the first 3 frets, but this will be ultra wide, and it will be 50 to begin with there, and we'll go up in pairs of these nuts that he can take out, change out for the next pair, which will be a 2mm increase in size. So he can go everywhere from 50 to 60mm spacing that way. This will stay the same, obviously. So the strings will come up through the spacing nut over a 0 fret, and he'll play in these bits here, and then he'll go over the nut here into the tuner. That's the idea. Ta-da! Anyway, so we're going to all that trouble to make sure that he can play around and get the right size spacing for his hands. Now obviously it's not going to be like playing an actual guitar, so it's all going to be a little bit fake, but at least it will give him a sort of chance to say, right, I think 56mm E to E spacing is what I need, and in which case we will go ahead and build a custom guitar or build it around a 56mm nut E to E spacing and a commensurately wide neck to match that, and a neck pocket and body and so on to go with that. So it's going to be a really interesting project to make something completely bespoke. And I just thought, well, rather than him guessing at a size that he thinks will be right, if we go do the best I can to give him something to make that cool with, and that unit, that little test rig I've made there was made from I bought a brand new 5-string MIJ brand bass, 5-string bass neck, and I had to cut it up especially for that. So but it was 25 quid for the neck. Would have taken me more time, money, to have made my own test rig, so I thought that was a good solution. Okay, so firstly I'm going to put this nut in place. Actually, I don't need to put it in right this second. What I'm going to get ready to do now, having crowned the frets, and I can still see some fairly kind of big grooves in here. We're going to have to live with them, but like I said, because otherwise we'll be going far too low on the frets. But with the sanding out part of the deal, we'll try and smooth them out as much as possible. There's quite a lot of sanding to do, through 400 to 600 to 1000 to 1500, and then a micro mesh series. And once we get through all of those, these will be nice and fresh again, and we'll be pretty much ready to fix the nut down and put some new strings on the final set of 10s, set up, intonate, stretch the strings out. So it's getting near to the end. I've got to get some 9-volt batteries, new ones to go in here. It's part of what I'm doing. So I won't oil the neck or anything, or oil the fingerboard just yet. Again, part of the thing is to get it masked off and polished out first. You know, I can see from here the frets look pretty old, but you know, this is what the polishing part of it is, or the sanding part. So they were clearly marked and scored and, you know, old and knackered from the beginning. So now we're going to do our best to sand and smooth them out. But for now, I'll do all of that stuff off camera. So the next thing will be, I'll come back to you probably short time tomorrow when I will have finished this, oiled the fingerboard, and we'll be ready to put on fresh strings and go from there. So you can see I'm going for thinner tape. Some stuff I bought in the market a while back, so I might as well use it up. I usually cut my own. I will do. I need to cut some more anyway. This doesn't go all the way to the end, but it's not bad. It saves me cutting quite so many strips on the board. So yeah, it's mainly an issue now of, you know, careful, thorough sanding. Of course, sanding at 400 grit. See, you have to think your way through the scratches you've made. So far, I've used 400 grit on the top of the frets using the leveling beam. I've used, I think it's 300 grit, or possibly even 150. I can't remember what it was on that crowning file, and unfortunately StewMac never marks those files. Well, it didn't when I bought them, they were unmarked. So it was either 150 grit or 300, but either which way, call it 300. So we've got 400 on the top of the fret, 300 on the sides of the fret, and the next level of sandpaper I'm going to use is 400, 2 pieces off. And I'm going to use that 400 to try and soften the 400 and 300 into one 400 level, and then we move to the 600, which will then bring 400 scratches to 600 and then to 1000. Now you might say it needs an 800 stage. You could be right, I don't know. It seems to work okay, and so I jump from 1000 then to 1500, and then from 1500 I jump across to the 1500 on the micro mesh and go through to 12,000, for which I'm having to mix old and new micro mesh, thanks to the seller, who suddenly decided that although the custom has always been to sell 9 grades in a pack of micro mesh, now they keep, I think they keep the price the same, but now they only give you 6 grades. So I bought some new stuff and then realised I hadn't got the usual, the 15, 18 or 2400. It was really annoying. So I had to go and bring those in from an old and fairly worn out set. So I was not happy with that. Didn't feel very, felt a bit swizzed, frankly. Anyway, so a little bit of cutting on the board, some thin bits here, and then we'll be off. But I shall sign off for tonight. As I go off to the absolute thrill of a little bit of a trip to Morrison's for some cat food in a minute. Okay, see you tomorrow. Thanks for watching. Whew. Okay, so we are at that stage of having sanded and polished out the frets. So the enjoyable part of removing all the masking tape and cleaning the final layers of dust off to reveal the delightful, delicious cleaned frets ready to go. Just short of a bit of oil and stretching and intonation, but this is where, oops, this is where I can get the nicest before and after pictures showing the difference between this old guitar prior to the clean-up and after. So just carefully removing the tape. Although I've got every confidence in this finish, still hard to know, so better remove carefully. You can hear the cows making quite a lot of protesting noises. Right, so this is the next day. Today's we ran late today because we had more hospital things and grocery shopping that we had to do. Couldn't avoid it. So I've not got a huge amount on today. I've already routed the custom scratch plate for JT's next strat style thing. I say strat style because it is not technically a strat, although it looks quite like one, and it has a strat, will have a strat tremolo. But yeah, did that, routed that out, which was quite a nice little operation. Made some slightly larger plastic spacer saddles for what's going to be Vince's test rig to get so he can ascertain the correct or the optimum playing E to E string spacing width for his large hands before I embark on making him a custom built guitar. Since it's obviously going to be a fair old effort and expense, we really need to get that bit right. So I've done quite a bit of preparation to give him a dummy device, yeah, a kind of a test rig that he can change the spacing on and try out how it feels to put his fingers on the chords. Now, as I said, it's not perfect, but it's one way of doing it. So, equally, these little screws here aren't the perfect screws, but they will do. Right, just a few spares. Okay, so this is currently a bit on the mucky side still, so we'll get chuck a load of naphtha on to give it a once over, get all the dust and any tape marks off, and then we'll be into the stringing up. That's the thing about when you polish up a guitar, then immediately it's on the path to getting grungy again, always the way. Now in this case I've turned the bridge round because I want the saddles facing this way to begin with, because I think I probably need the adjustment room going in that direction. I don't know, but I'm having a guess at that. So I've started that way, but obviously if that doesn't turn out to be the case, then we'll rework it. And putting it this way round doesn't give the best, it's not the best access to the intonation screws, but I'm prepared to put up with it for what I'm hoping is the extra room for adjustment. Anyway, so we're going to just clean off any marker pen that's remaining on these frets. We'll go over the headstock one more time, and then we'll glue the nut on. Finally, we've got some oil to put on as well. Had a couple of interesting comments on Facebook just recently, of the type that one always gets, and they read something like, I think the first one was a comment on now look, before I say this, I don't want the person who posted it to feel like I'm angry at them or getting at them looking for a big argument. I'm not. I just want to, as is my wont, I just want to kind of make a general point which in a sense more than anything I sort of marvel at. It makes me scratch my head. So I did 2 of Ron's ES339s the other day, and so both of them had exactly the same nut. I think I probably got it sitting here. Oh, well, maybe I chucked them away. Yeah, so both of them had exactly the same nut fitted, which is a very standard Epiphone white plastic nut. Now, I've done hundreds of these guitars, and I know exactly what the nut is and what it's made of. It's a kind of brittle, hard plastic. It's not the worst in the world. It's not spongy plastic that is impossible to cut. You know, it's usable if you had to. And I'm not I didn't set out just to criticize the nut. You know, my purpose is to fit one that will give it an even better chance of staying in tune. That's all I'm interested in. I'm not saying you couldn't play with that nut all day and all night. You could, but our deal is to get it staying in tune, playing and staying in tune. Hence I change it for Tusk. Now, so I make an hour and something video summarizing the key parts of this thing, including tapping the nut off and fitting the adjustable Tusk nut that I did on both those guitars, which I have had years of experience doing now, and which I know makes that kind of guitar is a brilliant upgrade for that kind of guitar, because it makes it stay in tune really well. So I went and did that, and then on comes a viewer who says something that reads almost exactly like he either said, "You do know that," or maybe without the "you do know" bit, but just straight into that model and that year was fitted with a Tusk nut. And I think I'm pretty certain he said, "You do know that." Now, you know, you shake your head a little bit at that, and you go, right, okay. So you think to yourself, well, first and foremost, okay, the bizarre bit to even start off with by talking as if you know better than I do what was directly in front of me, right? So, of course, the person commenting obviously wasn't there, and so at best, they think they know what was on there. And in this case, they think they know because they heard it or read it somewhere, and they figured out they know that that's such and such a year of a guitar, I think, and therefore, ... I know it's got to be that kind of nut. So they then decide to share that with me, and the bit that always makes me sort of smile is why. Okay, I've done it up close. I've got 8 years of experience doing this stuff. I know mostly what I'm looking at. Of course I make mistakes, and of course there are occasions when I haven't got a clue what I'm looking at. Right? I don't begin to imply that I am in any way perfect, etc., etc. It would be stupid. Okay. However, I am there. I have done this nut. I've done two exactly the same. I know exactly what the material is, and I have removed them because the material is crap, and well, it's not great. And a Tusk nut will give us a better chance, give the customer much better tuning stability. So I'm a go-in for it, right? Then the person kind of figures they know better and makes a comment, and I honestly can't understand what goes, well, I sort of can, what goes through your head, because probably, as I said many times before, I probably used to be that way myself, have been guilty of it, so I guess I do know what goes through your head. You think you're on a winner, you see something and you think, I know this, and so you leap forward, your ego makes you leap forward to share your super duper knowledge, and actually your ego gets its kicks more than anything out of proving other people wrong, and making you stand out, because you can tell yourself you're right and everyone else is just that little bit wrong. So, you know, this commenter then does that, and I just, he began FYI. Now I'm sure if you're reading that, Mr. Commenter, if you're listening to this now and that was you, I got nothing against you, and I don't want to kind of point you out and try and make you look silly or anything. I just want to point out that it's a completely bizarre approach, because you don't know, you weren't there, and your keenness to share what you do think you know, which is great. We all have our understanding of things. We know things, we've seen things, but your keenness to share it just completely tries to override my direct hands-on experience right there in the moment. So I genuinely, I don't want to use these for that. That's not what I want to use them for. I genuinely encourage you to think about it next time, right? And just stop and kind of consider that I know exactly what is in front of me. I've got them in my hand. I've thrown them in the bin because I know what they are. And I can promise you this guitar did not come to me with a tusk nut already fitted. So, but you know, I could imagine somebody saying, wow, that's interesting, because I thought most of these guitars, you know, came out of the factory with tusk nuts. That's a perfectly valid and reasonable conversation starter, okay? But people don't do that. They do it in such a way they can't help but tell you they know better, which is such a dopey strategy. It's such a destructive strategy, because it ends up creating conflict. Now, it's not creating conflict with me because I kind of understand it, and I've been young and foolish and done the same thing many times, which is probably why I recognise it anyway. But you know, it's a really bad communication strategy. So really do think about it. I think what was the other one that somebody told me the other day? There was another similar thing. I can't remember now. I was thinking of the tusk nut. What was it? Oh well, I mean, you know, there was the whole thing about the Gordon Smith brass nut. So a customer of mine who has a Gordon Smith, shared the Gordon Smith video I just did into the Gordon Smith fan club group on Facebook, which great, you know, I mean, I'm sure they'll find it interesting. And it's interesting that the first thing that happens is people go, why the hell did he take the Gordon Smith nut off? The whole point about the Gordon Smith is the brass nut. That's what makes it distinctive. No, I totally agree that a brass nut looks great. But my discussion with the customer went something like, shall we see if a tusk nut makes the tuning more stable than it was before? And I'll do one, like I'll replicate the original nut in tusk so that you can replace the original brass should you not like the tusk, or should you ever want to come and sell it to return it to original, etc. So the decisions on that guitar, the main decisions, the replacing the very flat frets, whether they were intended to be, you know, what do you call them, fretless wonder frets or not, it doesn't matter. My customer didn't like playing with completely flat frets and wanted new ones. So that decision was my customer's decision, and I'm happy to go along with that. And so was, the brass to tusk was my suggestion, and the customer was happy to go along with that. So the comments in the Gordon Smith thing were all about, what did somebody say? Why does he assume there's a problem with the brass nut? Or something to those, I can't remember if that was exactly it, but they implied that my whole thesis was there was a problem with the brass nut. And actually there isn't. You know, loads of guitars I've seen have had brass nuts. However, if they're not perfectly cut, they can create friction on the strings. And to be honest, unless you're particularly attached to the look of brass, which some people are and some people aren't, then you know it's worth going for whatever will give you the least friction and the best tuning stability. So anyway, that was the point of it. But it's funny, people sort of seeing people in this conversation jumping on not bandwagon, but you know, jumping into the melee, you know, to try and sort of land blows. Like, who is this guy? Who does he think he is? You know, if you what is it? You've got all these ideas about Gordon Smith, then you haven't got a Gordon Smith at the end of it. Well, no, it's I didn't buy the Gordon Smith, my customer did. And actually, well, the interesting part is that the faults that I found with that Gordon Smith, none of them really addressed it in any depth. So for example, the finish that just flaked off, although I have to say one person so far, well, when I looked at it yesterday, one person did say, yeah, that happened to them, or the finish fell off the neck. Well, I think that's pretty crappy. So I think that's not what you'd expect with a premium brand and, you know, British made guitar. But anyway, so, you know, there are some definite issues with that guitar that I found, you know, just struck me as being less than ideal, really. But I think the funny part is in all of these videos, as I've said many times before, people have this bizarre idea that there's an absolute thing you must and mustn't do because they were told it or read it, or it's how they think it should be, or whatever. And if they see you doing something else, people never stop, like the guy with it's a tusk nut on that guitar. No, it wasn't. They never stop to actually hear what you're saying about reality in front of you. They tell you gospel according to their dogmatic worldview, you know, and it's like, no, it's not like that in front of me, right here and now. That's not what's going on. And that's one of the biggest, I think I've said before, I think it's one of the biggest problems we've got on this planet, is people seeing what they insist in seeing and not what's actually happening. For damped, what happened there? Why is that not sitting? It's sitting on a little bump. Oh, blast. Well, it's perfectly set, but it's not sitting flat the way it was before. What happened there? Oh, it is sitting flat, it's just there's a little gap. Damnations. I don't want to knock it off. Okay. Right, well, I think I'm going to have to leave that the way it is, because if I take it off and lower it, it's going to go lower. Oh! Anyway, oh sorry, if I thin it, it's going to go lower. Right, let's have a quick look at the action down here. Now, okay, having turned it round, what I'm noticing is there's a big difference. Oh, that's because it's not on the slot, that's why. Okay. I think I may have to knock this off. I think I will do. That's really annoying. I think it will still fit because it's a little bit high right now, but because we had it down to the perfect height, so we'll go and get it again. That means I have to take the cover back off. Yeah, anyway, so that whole thing, just, I don't know, honestly, people don't. There's somebody once told me, or I learned an approach once, which funnily enough, although it felt too difficult to apply it to the situation that we were in at the time, which was a kind of difficult work environment. Okay, not really what I wanted to do, but it's taken a bit of the old paint off, but I'm going to have to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to thin it down on this front edge here a little tiny bit, and then try, if I can, just to get it back in nice and fitted into the slot, because that's how I thought it was before. It seems to have kind of wriggled out of the way. See that? Hard to see. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah. Well, what we've got here is not very level, so it's just making things a bit difficult. Let's continue to take a bit of thickness off it, a bit off the back here. Yes, so anyway, so I was in a work situation, and it was quite, toxic isn't maybe the right word, but it was full of anger and resentment and people not getting on very well. And so our directors brought in someone to come and sort of help us work our way through that difficulty. And she came in with a system, I suppose you could call it. Oh, why is that so crap? This is now looking too uneven. I should have looked closer. Yeah. So anyway, she was an exponent of a kind of communication strategy approach. I suppose could call it a therapeutic technique, maybe a communication technique. That's called clean language. And although it was difficult, I found it difficult to apply. In the heat of the situation we were in. God, that's a really uneven surface, courtesy of a lot of build-up of paint. So actually what happens is if I sand this back, I think we're going to find that we've got too much unevenness. Let's see if I can just at least get the nut to fit in properly. Anyway, so yeah, we sort of looked at this system, or this approach called clean language, and although I didn't go kind of for the whole thing full on, some of the kind of techniques I wasn't too keen on, but what I did get from it was a really, I think, a really brilliant approach to communication, and what it sort of showed was, or focused on, was that most of the time when we're communicating, what we're really doing is we're not finding out, we're not communicating cleanly with people. Most of the time we are communicating in a way that is really more about putting across our views rather than learning or finding out about somebody else's. So and so it's interesting because it means that when we kind of make out that we're communicating and listening, actually what we're often doing is putting or telling people our interpretation of the situation, and telling them what we think of them through that, which is in one level, in one sense, understandable. We all, most of us at some point have a need to be heard and to say what we think about a situation, and we want to be listened and heard out, and so on and so on. But it's really interesting. I found it really interesting when I listen very carefully to the degree to which I'm genuinely communicating and listening, or whether I suppose you could say another way is that I'm just getting ready to put across my own view. And I think one of the great ways of describing it is that we've all had experiences of when we're talking to somebody and we feel really desperate to be heard, but yet the person we're talking to seems to be seems to be just, I suppose you could call it, loading their gun, ready to have their shot. you know, they're not really listening. You don't feel they're listening to you. They're just waiting for their chance to fire the next salvo. And actually, if we're honest, most of us can recognise when we're doing only that, instead of actually, you know, if we asked ourselves honestly, are we really listening to what somebody's saying, or are we planning our next, you know, our next clever, devastating line that's going to win the battle for our egos? And if I get honest, you know, if I'm really honest about it, I can recognise when I'm doing that a hell of a lot of the time, more than I'd like to be. You know, I'm that person much more than I'd like to be, I suppose, is the truth. So it's a very, very interesting kind of approach to communication, because what it does is it talks, or the lady who was kind of working with us on it talks a lot about transitioning from contempt to curiosity, and I've always held on to that as a really, really important transition, and I honestly can tell when I'm not really curious. You know, I know in my heart of hearts, I know when the truth is I'm being contemptuous rather than curious. But by the way, this is going to have a bump of some kind on it, because this paint has glue, and the paint is uneven, and as I'm smoothing it out, fortunately it's lowering the whole thing, so we are not going to be in a very good position soon. I can hear it crunching, unfortunately, in that old finish. So if we're going to get a smooth finish, we're going to get a lowered one, but that's the way it has to be. And I'm also trying to get it to fit in. Anyway, I thought I'd got this sorted, but it's going to take me longer. Anyway, so the point was, you go, oh well, that's a nice sort of conceptual idea about communication, blah blah blah, but it really does apply to me as much as anyone else, so I can use it in my own sort of being honest and checking my own reactions to things, and I do as much as I can. I interrogate what I'm saying and how I'm behaving through that kind of framework. But the practical use of it is, well, you can see it in practice, that so when somebody tells me they know better, or I've done it wrong, and they definitely know better, the first thing I know is they are in effect essentially coming from contempt rather than curiosity, and you know, they don't know that framework, so they aren't asking themselves that question. But I can tell, I can be fairly confident that they are, if they did ask themselves questions about it, how the comment they left and so on, they would most certainly, if they asked themselves, did I leave that comment, you know, to find out more about why Sam used that method of fret leveling, for example, which is quite a common one in the past, where people have told me how wrong my method is. You know, if you ask yourself, am I doing it because I genuinely want to find out more about how he does his thing, or am I commenting because truthfully I want to get off telling him he's wrong and feeling that little bit better, that little kick that I get out of being right where he's wrong? And if we're honest about it, I think very often we will admit to ourselves, and I think the people in question writing those things, I almost certain would, if they were honest, they would be coming from the latter position. They don't want to know why I've done, or why even the way I do it doesn't fit with how they understand it. So hey, let me find out what his motivation is. They don't want to do that. What they want to do is they want to be right, and they want to score a point in their ego, to score a point or feel better than or cleverer than. Now, look at this, you see, when the glue came off came some of the finish. So that's a sort of in practice example of people, what it's like when we're coming from a position of contempt rather than curiosity about something. And you know, just as I can spot now when somebody's doing it, and I can be fairly confident that they're coming from contempt, not curiosity. But the plus thing is I can, by the same token, I can also recognise it in myself, you know. And sometimes when somebody triggers my buttons, you know, presses my buttons, and my ego wants to respond, and I snap back and say something back, I'm kind of coming from the same angle, really. I just want to be right and smack them down and look clever, or, you know, for my ego to think it's so damn clever. And that shut them down, didn't it? Hoo, aren't they stupid? And so I think that, generally speaking, it's one of those things that I've learned, that if we only all took a bit more care of making sure that our communication, or the things we said, or our responses, came from a position of curiosity rather than contempt, communication would be a lot better, and human relationships would be a hell of a lot better too. And no matter how much I do this, it still isn't quite sitting in that gap, because this isn't cut cleanly enough, and I don't really want to end up chopping down here like this, but might have to. Yeah, and there are some, in that clean language system, or kind of method, there are some really interesting ways, methods, things, processes you can do that when you first sort of think about them may sound a bit clunky, but actually I've used them in sort of in the heat of difficult communication, and they work fantastically well. And one of them is a thing called clean feedback, which I would never have believed once upon a time that you could actually use in the moment. It seemed to me, when we kind of discussed it and looked at it and practiced it, it seemed to be too clunky a thing, too deliberate a thing, you know, because when we're angry, we're sort of like on the fly, aren't we? And we last thing we want to do is stop and be considered and you know, structured, or revert to not a script exactly, but a kind of method, even if we know that method will help us regain some respect and peace in the interaction. But so we sort of the one of the ways that I was able to practice this, put it into practice, and got some really amazing results from it, was a thing called a system for giving feedback when something isn't right, and in a way you're relating to someone else in any situation. And it's something that, like I said, when you look at it to begin with, or if you first come across it, you might think, well, that's too clunky. How could I ever, you know, diffuse something long enough to say this, this, and this, or to frame it this, and that way? And actually, the more I understood it, the better, or the more I practiced it, the better I got at doing it. And the fact that it was a bit clunky, actually, in the midst of some of the worst arguments, actually didn't matter, because the clunkiness of it actually provided a means to stop and go, can I just try something? Because we're obviously, this is really painful for both of us. And when you do something like that, people aren't expecting it, and they sort of, if they recognise that this conversation is currently going nowhere good fast, you'd be amazed that my experience is that people will stop and go, okay, what? And you go, okay, look. And so what you do is you practice this thing of, I'll just say it sort of as I remember or understand it, because you can find out about this stuff if you're interested. But what you do is you share with somebody what it is that they do in a certain situation that isn't working for you, and you put it in that language. So, and again, this is where it sounds bizarrely, I don't know, alien to us, maybe American even, you know. So I'll give you, rather than explain it, I'll give you an example. I was having this massive argument with my stepson, and we were heading quickly down familiar old patterns, and it was clearly going nowhere, and neither of us were getting anywhere, and it was a horrible, familiar, depressing sort of argument, and it was only going to end up in us each walking away quickly in anger before it turned into physical, whatever. So there we go. Having cleaned up this thing now, it's now too low. So I am going to have to boost this, which is now going to be a challenge. So I'll carry on telling you the story while I look for something to boost this with. So anyway, yeah. So we were at this place in this argument, and it was pretty horrible, and literally with nowhere else to go, I just took the risk of saying, "Can I try to do something a minute? Just trust me for a second, because I know this isn't working, and I don't like the way it's going." And that little intervention sort of got his attention, and he said, "What?" Teenager sort of way. Well, not teenager now, but grown adult sort of way. And I said, and this is the kind of the method. I said, what isn't working for me at the moment is, and I told him that it was something that when I had told him how I felt about something, he had decided that it was his place to interpret how I felt about it and say, but that's kind of tell me how I felt. So that was triggering me and making me feel mighty peed off. So I said, what isn't working well for me is when I tell you I'm feeling this and you say X and Y. And I quoted back, and the secret is to quote back exactly what someone said, not what you think they said or what it means to you. You just tell them the exact words, right? And therefore you have to obviously use what was really said, the truth, factual. You can't make it up and you can't embellish it. You have to take out your interpretation and just say the thing that was actually said. So I said, what doesn't work well for me is when I tell you I woke up at 7 o'clock, and you then say to me, yeah, well, I don't think you did. I think you woke up at 8, 9, 10. And then the next bit in the method is, having said the factual thing that nobody who was watching could disprove, because that's important that it's a factual thing. Once you've said the factual thing, then you add a second part which says, well, you take ownership of how you interpret it. So you then say something very similar to, I take that to mean. So if you do it in fairly quick order, you say, what doesn't work well for me is, I told you I got up at 8 o'clock in the morning, and you immediately said, no you didn't, it was 12 or 1, and I know for a fact it was 8 o'clock. Then you straight away go into, I take that to mean that you think you know better than me. Now, because I take it to mean, right, you're owning how you interpret it. And so you can be absolutely straight and honest with how you interpret it. Okay, so it can be as absurd or as off the wall or as loopy as it needs to be, or as it really is. It doesn't matter. It's because that part of the statement is, I used to call it my confection, the thing I made up. It isn't based in reality. The only thing that's true is that I said I got up at 8, and everyone in the room would have heard him say, no you didn't, you got up at 12. The next part I can, because I'm owning it, I'll say what it makes me feel like. So I take this to mean, and then I could then tell him, and I told him, I take this to mean that you think you know better, and I'm lying about what time I got up. Whatever the interpretation I have on it, I share it with him like that. And then I stop, and then I say, what would work better for me would be if, when I say I tell you I got up at 8 o'clock, you don't tell me I didn't. Okay, now that sounds like a simple enough request. And he might still have an idea that I got up at a different time, but I've asked him, even if he does think that, I've asked him not to do something specific. So I've said our communication would work better if when I say something, you don't immediately tell me it's not true. So you do when you do, what's not working for me is this, factual, not interpretation. I take it to mean my interpretation is, and that can be as wild and as paranoid and as nuts as it really is for you. What would work better for me would be when I do this, you do or don't do that. And then the final part is I would take that to mean, and in this case I think I said something like, you would respect that that's how, in this case it was about feeling something, or something mattering to me, and I said I would take it to mean that you respected that that's how I actually felt about it, even if it didn't look like it to you or whatever. So those four components. What isn't working well for me at the moment is, and you can only limit that, constrain that to provable things, not interpretations like, you think I'm an absolute idiot. That's an interpretation. You can only phrase it in things that an independent observer could point to and say, yep, that he actually did that when you said good morning, he actually threw a cup of water at you, or something unequivocal, but nothing involving interpretations. You think I'm you hate me, therefore you did this. So the first thing is you just say what actual thing, provable thing, witnessed thing didn't work for you. You tell your interpretation. I take that to mean you hate my guts, you think I'm a slime ball, you want to kill me, blah 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 blah. Whew, got that off my chest. And then the idea being that the person listening hears you take ownership for what you take it to mean. Now sometimes they might have intended that, in which case they go, yes, that's what I meant you to feel, you swine. But sometimes in communication people will be amazed, thinking, you really took it to mean all of that? But they get to learn what it meant to you. So, and then the third part is you give them a sort of factual based, reality based hint at what would work better for you in future. They don't have to do it, but you're kind of making a request, if you like. And then the final bit is you say, and kind of, if you did it that way, I would interpret that to mean that, even where you don't agree with me, you would at least take me at face value and perhaps ask a question to see if I really did feel that way, or if I understood it in the same way as you do, blah blah blah. And that was a brilliant little system, because like I say, I put that into practice in the middle of this, and I don't do it all the time. I haven't done it that much, but in some really bad situations I put it into practice. And if it's new to you, and as it was to me, it can feel quite clunky, and so I got over the clunkiness of it by stopping and asking the person I'm having this big argument with if they minded if I try to phrase it another way. And actually most people who are in the middle of a crap communication engagement, most people are, if they're good people, most good people are keen or happy to get off that train. Do you know what I mean? Now I'm going to just do a little cut down here. Oh, you're going to hear me over here, but so I think what you want to do is just hold your ears. I'm just going to cut back this nut, because I'm going to now have to sand this down into pieces, or a workable boot for this nut. So how am I going to do it? I'm going to do it face down. I'm going to run this. Hold on a sec. I was having to do that by hand, so it's a kind of slightly dangerous little manoeuvre. But so what I've done is I've cut this back. It's got its little boot on the end to lift it up. It's not perfect. It's a little bit overhanging on one side, but it's better than nothing. And so what I'll end up doing is sanding it again, keeping a perpendicular 90-degree angle if I can. There's a bit to sand off the front here too, so I want to sand that down flush. Yeah, so anyway, it's an amazing system, because what it does is well, first of all, it intervenes allows you, or it's a way of intervening in a cycle that's otherwise out of control. And no matter how much we think about our ways of communication, or whether we don't, we've all experienced that horrible feeling when you're in a kind of familiar argument or a fight that just keeps going out of control, and it's like there's nothing you can do to stop it. And none of us enjoys that, really, you know. So it's a great way of interrupting that process, I've found. And the best part about it for me is the fact that it structurally, deliberately strips apart, or separates, I should say, out fact and actions from interpretations, because most of our communication is all about, as I said, you know, when somebody kind of tells me what I should and shouldn't be doing on YouTube, it's usually about the ego judging you so that it can feel better than you, or my ego kind of being righter than someone else, so I can feel special for a brief moment. So it's a great way of separating out facts from feelings, or sorry, not feelings, facts from interpretations, because the interpretations all belong to me. You know, when somebody like my stepson, you know, did that thing, he wasn't trying to tell me, you know, the thing I said it meant to me, I take this to mean. He wasn't telling me that at all. He meant something completely different, but I took it to mean what I needed to take it to mean, so I could feel a certain way and have a tantrum and, you know, carry on the fight. And most of us, in most of our communications, are doing a version of that most of the time, or a lot of the time, until we work it out, figure it out, and stop doing it. So it's a brilliant little system for stripping out interpretation and from facts, and dealing with both, right, but separately. And I guess that's the learning, or the kind of secret of it, is that most of the time we willfully almost mix the two up. So we don't acknowledge that the thing we take it to mean belongs to us. So we go, he looked at me in that way, therefore it means my mums are this, and therefore I'm going to have to fight him because my honour's at stake. And, you know, it's that sort of reactive, I've got no control, I have to react in this certain way. And that people who are reactive like that almost always can't separate out the actual thing that happened from the interpretation that they are responsible for. You know, somebody says to you, hey, why don't you get a job? And you take it to mean you're a complete failure, you've done absolutely nothing worthwhile since school, everything you ever did you've fallen into, and you've been a charlatan, and you're just waiting to be found out, and you're a complete failure, you'll never have a big expensive company and a Porsche and a yacht like all those other people you went to school with, yada yada. That's all my interpretation. I'm making it up. Of course I don't feel that way at all, but, you know, that's my interpretation. But you can see that most of the stuff that we react off is our own shame interpretation of whether we're successful or failures or whatever. And actually, it's kind of almost nothing to do with what was actually said in the process of communication. So this business of separating out the provable fact, actions, statements that are unequivocal, and deliberately separating them from the interpretation and owning the interpretation is the most amazing part of this little system I've been on about. And once I learned how to do it, it was slightly miraculous, because now I can put it into action, and not always. Sometimes I just kick off like everyone else, but once you have the awareness of it, you can never have the awareness of it. You always know that most of the time, if you're reacting to something, what you're really doing is you're reacting to your baggage stroke interpretation. And when you're trying to communicate with someone else, they can't possibly take charge or be responsible for your reaction. I mean, they can know people. There are a lot of unkind people who have a pretty good idea that they can trigger a reaction from you, and by saying certain things, and that doesn't absolve them of their, if they want to have good communication, a degree of responsibility not to do that stuff deliberately. But saying that is very different from saying that they own that interpretation, that they give it to you. They don't. They trigger, whether intentionally or accidentally, and then we bring our interpretation to it. So this process of naming what they did that doesn't work, keeping it strictly to factual things, and thereby making sure I take ownership of the what I interpret it to mean, all the sort of the meaning stuff, and the stuff that I'm really reacting to. That's an amazing way of changing the dynamic in an argument. And in that occasion with my stepson, I said, I can't remember exactly how I said it, but I sort of made it very clear to him, look, if I do this, we both get a chance to say this. Shall I go first to show you how it goes? And because like most good people, we both wanted an exit from that loop. So we got the exit from that loop, and I said my bit, and then he got a chance to say his bit, and he didn't kind of understand it to begin with. So when I think he said, what doesn't work for me, what doesn't work very well, or isn't working well for me, is when you, and he immediately added some interpretation. He kind of named some interpretation. You treat me as if I'm, and I said, no, well, to just try and concentrate on what exactly it was I said in this situation. So he struggled a bit to take the interpretation out of it, but he stuck with it, bless him. I'm proud of him for sticking with it, and was able to articulate it only in, witnessable, factual statements. And so we got through it, and it genuinely, completely stopped the argument. We just stopped at the point where we each had our share of saying what we needed to say. And at that point we stopped and went our ways and kind of thanked each other. It was incredible, really. The thing about it is, it's available in inverted commas to anyone. That's pretty good. If anything, it's a fraction high still, but this is also for Martin's brother, and it doesn't have to be the ultra low, but I will take a tiny bit more off the bass. In fact, what I'll do is I'll measure the action first. Yeah, so anyway, I just thought I don't know why. Well, I do know why, actually, because it's connected to the way people relate to each other online a lot. So, when somebody does that online and they say to me, well, actually it's slightly different, but when somebody online tells me how something is, or that tells me that I'm doing wrong, my first point of consideration is, let's see, 1.7, so we want to take 0.3 off the base end. My first sort of point is that coming from curiosity or contempt? And it's usually from contempt. They want to score points, they want to show themselves to be better than me, or they think they're going to make themselves feel better by putting me down, or catching me out, or finding me wrong, or proving me wrong, or whatever. So, and then I sort of think, well, okay, what I tend to reply back is, is usually to say something like, you know, why don't, instead of assuming that you're right and I'm only doing this after 7 years of working this way and getting happy customers and successful results from doing it this way, instead of assuming that you're right and I'm wrong, you know, why not find out a bit more about why I do it this way, because I evidently do, and it's I keep telling you it's working for me, so you know, why not find something to be curious about it? And that's a genuine request. I'm not being patronising. I you know, if you're going to interact at all, find some. If you disagree with me, that's fine, but find an angle that you can ask a question about it. Instead of telling me I'm wrong, be curious. Does that really work that way for you? Or does that work better than this? Or how do you judge why that blah blah blah? You know, ask a question that will give you more information and inform you that you'll come away knowing a little bit more than you did before. Because just to be right just means you end up going away knowing exactly what you knew before, actually nothing more. And what you knew before, you probably didn't know anyway, really. You just you know, you assume it and then you're stuck to it. So anyhow, it's this clean feedback and clean language thing. I really like it as a way of thinking about getting better communication, especially in situations where it isn't working. And I've resolved, you know, in situations like I'm doing stuff with the parish council, which is really difficult, and there are some difficult players, and I'm sure they probably think I'm a difficult player, and so on and so on. But I've privately committed myself to, if I need to say something to somebody, I'm going to do it in that format of clean feedback. And even if the person I'm speaking to in front of the rest of the council, you know, even if it sounds a little bit odd, what's he saying? I still know that it will be productive to frame it in that way, because it will force me to separate out, take ownership of my ego's interpretation of what things mean, and it will force me to be specific about ways that somebody could help improve the communication between me and them in a way that's possible for them to do. So when you don't separate out the actions, the factual actions from the interpretation side of it, you don't give the person you're relating to any chance to change and improve it. No matter what you say, they can't change how you interpret something. But if you give them that responsibility, and they don't realise that it's not theirs, they will try and change what they're doing, but it'll never work because you're not taking responsibility for the interpretation part of it, which really is yours. So for me, the miraculous bit about the technique is the separation of the factual stuff from the interpretation stuff, and in doing so you give the person you're having a difficult communication with at least a chance. If they want better communication, you give them the chance to you know, if you just say to somebody, you know, what doesn't work well for me is when you say this word. I mean, that's a pretty good way. You know, let's think of a word, or I'm not going to say the word, but let's think of a word that doesn't make me feel good. So maybe a racial epithet or something. I'm not a person of colour, but let's imagine, you know, something like that. There's a word I don't like to hear, and you keep using it. And I would say to you, you know, very simply, what doesn't work well for me in our communication is when you use the word whatever it is. And so if I keep it as simple as that, then I've said to them, I mean, they're entitled to use, as much as anyone is entitled to use whatever word that is, but I've told them that's something that isn't great for me. And then I tell them why, but I take ownership of it. I say, because I kind of feel terrible, and I think of all the people or all the people in my family that have such and such, or what happened to people of my kind, or whatever the word is. And I tell you, a lot about how it impacts me, but I take ownership of it. I don't make it your fault that I feel those ways. I just tell you that if you use that word, that's how I tend to react to it, because I take it to mean this, that, and the other. And even if you say to me, well, I didn't mean you to feel that way, I'm still telling you that whether you mean it or not, that's what I'm going to do with it, and that's how I'll end up feeling. So the great thing about that is that if I just tell you, it's very simple. When in our conversations together, when you use that word, this is how I feel, or I take it to mean, sorry. And if you want, you can have an extra level on that and goes, and I feel, because of that, I feel X, Y, and Z. Okay, still that's my ownership. I interpret it this way, and I feel X way about it. So you learn more about me, and you can sort of see, well, okay, if I use that, he's telling me that, he interprets it this way, and he, as a result, feels that way, and you can say, right, I know more about Sam and his reactions to things, and then I can say a request, what would work better for me in our communication would be, and I keep it again the same way, very factual, very, very no interpretation. What would work better for me is if you didn't use that word. Again, you're entitled to. We're only talking about what would make our communication better, right? So I say what would work better for me is that you didn't use that word, and I can then expand by the interpretation part, and I can say, and I would take it to mean, even if you didn't mean it like this, I would probably take it to mean that you had heard my request and you were considerate of my feelings, blah blah blah. Now again, this separation is really amazing, because you can hear it right away that you may not have meant that you respect my feelings. You may have stopped using that word just because you're too tired of my stupid touchy-feely super reactiveness. Actually, it kind of doesn't matter, because I'm in charge of what I interpret it to mean, so I'm giving you a bit of extra information. If you did it for whatever reason, I would still probably take it to mean that you cared about my feelings, and you can summarize, or you can weigh that up and probably think, oh, okay, that was not such a bad outcome if he thinks I'm caring about his feelings. I hate his guts, really. But it doesn't matter. So you might then, you at least know how I'm processing it, and you also know very cleanly what I've told you would improve our communication, what you could do, your bit that you could improve our communication. And then, of course, you have an opportunity to do the same. But like with my stepson, it helps that one person has the experience of spotting when the factual event that we're talking about, the thing we're talking about, is mixed up in interpretation. And I have to tell you, it's incredibly hard to separate them out to begin with. You'll find, if you ever experiment with something like this, you'll find yourself almost by completely unconsciously slipping back into filling your statements with interpretation. It's almost like you can't, most people I think discover just how ingrained it is in us to mix interpretation with the fact, so that the thing that we're responsible for, what we make some situation mean, we see it as inseparable from actual reality. And that's the miracle of this thing, is when you begin to see that your interpretation of something is actually your responsibility for completely, separate from what anyone else intends for you, and also it's separate from anything that you would have possibly called reality before, which is, it's just this way. You say that, I have to do this. And when you realise most of your reaction in everyday life comes off the back of you unconsciously taking your interpretation of what's being said or what you see, and treating your interpretation as if it was reality, and not noticing that it's always an interpretation, and in that sense you have power over it, power to change it, as well as power to basically to change it and change how you respond to it. Saying it's a bit long. Well, that's a pain, because let's try a couple more. We don't want is that to be long. Fractionally is. The top one can't afford to be long. Well, okay. What it's suggesting to me is that we're going to have to slack this off and switch the bridge around the other way. I didn't really want to have to do that, but we can. It's a better reach for the adjuster screws anyway, but you have to start one way to find out which is the closest fit. So here we go. Hopefully we can just hoik this off. I'm going to switch it right round. Actually, what I'll do is I'll make the adjustments first. Yeah, anyway, so that was a bit of a long-winded thing, but it's something that I feel very very strong about, because because I kind of learned it and put it in, experimented putting it into action, and I'd like most people, I've had spent my life getting kind of surviving better or worse communication experiences, shall we say, and to that little bit of, if you like, communication technology in a sort of loose sense of the word, really works for me, and it's one that the reason I kind of share it with people is because it works. I can also sort of describe it in action. You know what I mean? And so it doesn't have to just be theoretical. You can say, well, there was this time when this happened. And in telling that story, you can see that it's a real experience. That in the case of the discussion or the crappy communication with my stepson, it was just one of infinite number of conversations that had all gone, or arguments that had all gone the same way. And to be able to break out of that, and I have to say our relationship has been actually a hell of a lot better since just that thing alone we did together. And yet you couldn't really put your finger on it and say why that would change so much. I think it did because it stopped the destructive cycle first. And I suppose the even the importance of stopping that cycle is hard to estimate. Because it's not something we have a lot of experience of doing usually. Yeah, I mean, I don't know about you, but a lot of, when relationships aren't good or they're not working out or whatever, there's not many, a majority of people, or maybe a minority. Look at that. So that's got to come back. Yeah, it's not that common to have the experience of you know, being able to improve something from bad to really good. You know, things tend to decay rather than, or often relationships. A lot of people experience relationships as getting worse rather than getting better. Of course, I've done this the wrong way around. This should be at the. Oh, I'm such a fool. This should be at the shortest bit, and it should get longer down the other end. Why didn't I tell myself? I'm not paying attention. Anyway, let's get this one started first. Yeah, so go back a little bit. Yeah, so it's just a really kind of useful thing. And it, you know, there are occasions when along the way I've learned little bits, and one of them I remember. I might have told this story before, but years ago I was in academia and I was working for this woman in university, and she was very, very angry and fiery all the time. Not saying I wasn't necessarily. I was no angel. But see, I remember one time she did something completely unfair. I felt it was just so unjust. She completely misrepresented something or did something totally undermining or whatever. And actually, you know, I had every right to be, if you like, in technical terms, be furious and have a massive argument. And I went into her office to have it out with her. And I remember being in there, and she did something right there and then that kind of sparked my buttons. And I'd been learning a bit about something to do with this thing about my interpretation, you know, what's mine and, you know, what's somebody else's. And I remember going in deliberately thinking, if she says such and such, I'm going to do one thing only in this session. I'm determined not to react. Okay, so whatever she says, I'm going to try a method or a technique of just letting it roll over me. No matter how righteous I am or how, you know, how indignant I am, because sometimes you can find that righteousness can sort of validate you grandstanding and having a massive explosion, you know, because you're so right. Of course you're entitled to kick off because you're right, you're noble and right and you're correct, you know, and it doesn't make the world a better place. So anyway, I went into this office and we had this difficult argument-y conversation, and at some point she did this thing, and so out of order I felt, and I could feel this righteous anger brewing up, ready to explode into you know, my crusade, you know, Knight on the White Charger and all that malarkey. But I caught myself, and I remember very deliberately saying, just don't, in my head, don't say a word, shut up. And I did, and it was, for the first split second, it was impossible. You know, the feeling was just horrendous. It was so righteous, and it was so unjust, and she had so wrong to do what she just did and said or whatever. But I shut my gob and I sat there, and I had this amazing experience of feeling this righteous injustice, indignant anger passing over me. And the first thing that totally surprised me was that it only lasted a few seconds, you know, and then it was gone, like a wave. You know, if you're sitting on the edge of a reef or something, the wave just came, washed over, boiled over the top of me, and then was gone. And then there was kind of quiet So it sounds very poetic, but it was literally like that. And so there I was, kind of in this strange place. You know, she'd had a little statement. I'd created a bit of silence by saying nothing. Oops, I'm getting in tune. Yeah, I'd created this space by saying nothing and not reacting, not interpreting. Just doing the simplest thing of all. Creating something different by not doing what I normally did. That I had every justification to do, and so on and so on. And the amazing thing was that once in this little space, there we go, intonated. Well, that's it, the West Tone is done. But in this little space, when the anger had gone, it was this fabulous feeling of I was no longer hurt by what she'd done, or I didn't have to react. And actually, what the incredible thing was, I didn't even resent her. There was I'd lost all that massive wealth of resentment that I had before, and it had passed. And suddenly, out of the silence, I could just wait a bit, and then I could ask her a question about how something was for her. And it didn't mean I was defeated, or that she had got away with abusing me because I was a wimp, or, you know, I hadn't stood up for myself and slaughtered her with my vorpal blade, you know, my scimitar of justice and all the things that you kind of think you have to do. Didn't need to do any of that, because I changed one bit and I was no longer in the grip of it, because I just didn't respond the way I normally would, and I let all the feelings that normally drive it, the anger and injustice and righteousness and all of that ego stuff, I'd felt it, but it had passed. Because I felt it had passed really quickly. And suddenly I was in a place where I didn't have to be belligerent or angry or fight her or set out to trap her or catch her out or knock her down or any of those things. And I have to tell you, it was amazing. You know, I was able to talk to her. We talked for hours, or, you know, a long time in her office, and we just made a much better relationship out of that. Now, does it mean that she wasn't a stressed out, crazy woman, you know, struggling with her role and managing arseholes like me? No, you know, she was all of those things and difficult to get on with. But I let go of being in the loop of it, where I had no choice other than I just had to react. And it was a fabulous experience, and I was kind of almost not euphoric exactly, but I was just blown away by the freedom it gave me to create better relationship with her. And actually after that we had a much better time, and she didn't change anything really. She didn't become a better person the way I would have imagined in my head that she had to be beforehand. You know, it would have been conditional. Well, we'll have a better relationship when you stop being a psychotic, you know, stressed out, hectoring, blah blah blah, all those cliches, you know. And actually, we had a better relationship when I stopped reacting. I chose to be the one who broke out the reaction, because I could. You know, maybe another time she might have learned how to do it, but I figured it out and I was able to do it. And yeah, it was a great experience. And it only takes one thing like that to make you want to look for opportunities to do it again, because it's such a powerful and useful and transformative experience. You know, to not have to be in reaction to people in a familiar way that you've always done. You know, such a destructive way. So, anyhow, I've got 2 9-volt batteries that I will put in this guitar when Martin comes to collect it. But for now, they're going to go in the packet in the box. But this is done. Lovely guitar. It's the original Dead Spiders are still in there. This sticks out the thing there. Anyway, I don't quite exactly know why that story. I went into that story in such detail, but I kind of do because it's what I've learned over the years about communication, and it's what makes me sad when people, without that understanding, go plonking themselves around the internet, communicating in ways that are just not guaranteed, but almost certain to, make communication worse, not better. So, if you ever want to check it out, I think it's called Clean Language, and it's a bit of a mouthful isn't the word, but it's a bit of a complex thing. If you see the whole academic kind of, I have to say this, no offence, because I've been an academic, but typical of academia, the people who sort of promote it, push it, tend to, like all good academics, make a big mouthful out of something where it probably would help to strip it down to its simpler components in some ways so that people could grasp it. But it's still a very productive approach, and I've found that I can use it very simply without having to sort of buy into all of the academic sort of backdrop to it. I can use it in real time, and that's what excites me about it, or pleases me about it. When I'm here, I'm going to just have a little bit of fun with a bit of some strings, and I'm going to have a go at attaching. These haven't got notches in them, but I just want to see if in principle this thing works since I've built it. So what do? We go through here with this. Anyway, that was my little story, but I mean, I tell it because it really was a transformative little thing to learn, and having used it for real since, it's definitely got a real world value. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just see if I can get this easily through here. This may stick up. No, that's okay. So there's our, oh look. Oh yes. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to lock this in place. So this had to be fairly chunky grub screws, because the ball string has been held at this end for the tuning thing, and at this end it's only held, the string is only clamped by grub screws, and the little tiny ones that I often use, I haven't got the grip power, so I kind of decided to go to the M3 sized ones, so we get a proper grip. So of course there's no nut. Oh, that's not tightened. There are no nut slots on here yet, so it's not done up. It's not done properly. I just want to sort of roughly see how all this works, test it in principle, and then I'll do all the individual slots and then get the sort of actual thing. To be honest, the only reason it needs slots is to allow me to make different spacings. Right now it's going to sit at its default spacing, which is what it's got here on the brass thing, so that's okay. We'll use this as a start point, but these will have to have slots, because that's how I'm going to be able to set the individual spacings, so like that and so on. So they're all going to run along like that. Right now they're going to go in a straight line until I've done the slots, but I just want to test out the principle. Anyway, so just a little extra mess about. So yeah, it's not, I always found these things, systems or toolboxes or things to supposedly make communication better and so on. To me, they're great, often very, sure there's lots of good information in them, but I find that if we struggle to kind of apply them and make sense of them, then sometimes it can be unhelpful. So I think that what I liked about this clean feedback thing as a way of, of maybe improving a difficult relationship, maybe at work, or in my case now, like a parish council situation, which is very fractious and lots of competing needs and feelings and suspicions and so on and so on. I think something that you can make sense of and see how and why it works in simple terms is really valuable, because it's no longer academic. It's a practical thing, and you sort of make sense of it by putting it into practice and seeing the difference it makes. But it is it's incredible improvement. And I've got to say that it was in sort of getting to a place of desperation with my stepson, to think, how do we get out of this loop of argument that we've been in for the longest while? And it really was a long time. And I think in a way the difference started exactly at the point where I said, look, I'm sorry, this is not how this is not how I want it to be, and this is terrible. Can we try something? Are you willing to just try something I learned as a way of breaking or improving communication in a situation like this? And he was, and like I said, I think most people would be, because actually I've got, you have to have the faith that most people don't really enjoy being in conflict. And I know when the adrenaline's going, a lot of people seem like they do, but the truth is, nobody really likes being at war with other people. Our truer selves want to be at one with the rest of the human race. That's my honest view. So yeah, just the opportunity to even try and try something to make a difference was an important part of the change, how things changed. Okay, so look at this. Oh yes. Oh man, that's obviously too high at the other end, but I can play a huge grade C chord. Oh yeah. All right, notches. Yes, need notches. Notches. There's my blank. So I'm going to have the E to E at this end with. This would start off with being, let's say, 50 at this end, and then we go to 55 up here, and then we go to 60 eventually, and then we go to 66. So it's whatever it is here plus 10%. This is leaning forward a bit, but it doesn't really matter, because it's only has to, it's going to go up over this 0 fret here anyway. And so it's now, you can actually play it. Well, you can't play it because it's, well, you can. Not high enough up to get to play, but anyway, that's okay. The whole point isn't to play; it's just to feel the string difference, string shapes. Woo! Brilliant! It's working. Okay. Anyway, enough of that. Hope I didn't bore you with that little chat about stuff, but it's just me rabbiting on about my views on life occasionally. It's funny because YouTube is not really a place for doing that. It, if people think you're talking about serious matters or anything too heavy, man, they don't want to risk their advertising environment, so they kind of tell you off and demonetize you if they think it's controversial. Now, I don't quite imagine how having better communication in difficult relationships, how that could possibly be controversial or upsetting for an advertiser, but you don't know what they're like. Speaking of advertising, by the way, just before we go, I got an invitation, like many YouTubers do, yesterday, late last night. Did I want to review any of the following products? And I've had a couple of offers before, particularly on guitars. And normally I would say no thanks, because I'm not a review channel. And also, I may not, ultimately may not end up saying what you want to hear. I'm certainly going to say what I find. But as it happens, one of the products that this company had was on offer to review was a wireless mic. Now, as you know, I've been using this for a while now, and I like it because it keeps the noise to signal ratio constant. And what I don't like about it is that it's a little bit dead, and it's a vocal mic, so for singing, I think. So it doesn't pick up a nice ambient, background environmental sound, which the iPhone on its own without that does. So I thought actually it'd be quite interesting to try it out and compare it to this. So I've said to them, if they want to send me one of those, I will compare them. I'll compare them and see. I don't know what these things stand for. Yeah, I'll compare them because I can make a direct comparison on the sound of the videos. And to be honest, if it were to improve, then I would switch over to that. I'm quite happy to say, but it would have to go into the iPhone. This goes into the iPhone, but in a bit of a, as you can probably see, a bit of a complicated way. So we've got this going into the iPhone here, and then down there that comes out of the, how do you do this? That comes out of the Samsung unit that I use, which is a little wireless thing running on USB charged battery power, and then this connects to that, and then they're coupled, they both go green, and that puts the sound up into the iPhone. So we'll see what the alternative is and if it's any good. But meanwhile, thank you for watching. That was the Westone, great old guitar, definitely worth fighting for. So see you soon on another one.